Thank you.
I was afraid to
Whenever you're ready, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Your Worship, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof.
I will declare on item 9.1.3 of the committee reports, as I have a personal relationship with the developer involved. Any others? Councilor Vasilakos?
Yeah, item 5.1 on the Finance and Labor Relations Committee. As a private citizen, I'm involved both with Cycle Stratford in one of their events and the Community Foundation. I sit on their grant review committee, so I won't participate in discussions with those.
Thank you. Councilor Burback?
Same item, 5.1, Finance and Labor Relations Committee. I have business relationships with the Stratford Symphony Orchestra, Interchamber, Stratford and District Horticultural Society, and Cycle Stratford.
Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on.
Moving on to item 3, adoption of the minutes, and there's a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of council dated January 27th and the special meeting of council dated February 4th be adopted as printed.
Moved by Councilor Gaffney and seconded by Councilor Vasilakos that the minutes be adopted. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried.
Moving on to item 4, adoption of the addenda. There is an addenda on your desk to add items 5.5, 11.8, and 11.9 with a motion that the addenda to the regular agenda of council be added to the agenda as printed.
Moved by Councilor Beattie and seconded by Councilor Burback that the addenda be adopted. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Moving on to item 5, report of the Committee of the Whole in camera. Item 5.1, from the January 27th session, a matter concerning the security of municipal property of the municipality was considered. And item 5.2 from that session, a municipal modernization service delivery review was considered with a staff recommendation that city staff be authorized to issue an RFP to retain consulting services for the development of a municipal modernization service delivery review. And that in accordance with the city's purchasing policy, that council consider appointing 3 members of council at this time to the evaluation team, as well as a CAO and Director of Human Resources or their respective delegates.
Councilor Clifford, you'll move. Seconder, Councilor Vasilakos, and I believe the 3 members are the Chair of Finance, Councilor Clifford, the Vice Chair, Councilor Gaffney, and myself as Mayor. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Moving on to item 5.3, at the February 4th session, a matter concerning the following item was considered, a matter relating to advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and at that meeting, direction was given. Moving on to item 5.4, just prior to this evening's meeting, a session was held to consider the following items. The first, about advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege and litigation or potential litigation, about personal matters about an identifiable individual, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on behalf of the municipality, and personal matters about identifiable individuals. And at the in-camera session, direction was given on all items.
Thank you.
Turning to your addenda, item 5.5 relates to the health unit merger, and there is a staff recommendation that a cost apportionment termination agreement between the Corporation of the City of Stratford, the Corporation of the Town of St. Mary's, and the Corporation of the County of Perth with respect to the Perth District Health Unit shared services be adopted, that a revised cost apportionment agreement between the Corporation of the City of Stratford, the Corporation of the Town of St. Mary's, the Corporation of the County of Perth, and the Corporation of the County of Huron be adopted, and that the Mayor and Clerk or their respective delegates be authorized to sign the agreements.
Moved by Councilor Ingram, second by Councilor Burback. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried.
Turning back to your agenda, item 6, hearings of deputations and presentations. Item 6.1 is a public meeting with a staff recommendation that the council meeting adjourn to a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear draft approved plan of subdivision 31T 18-001A and to reconvene at the conclusion of the public meeting.
Moved by Councilor Ingram, second by Councilor Bunting, that we adjourn for the purposes of conducting a public meeting. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. I'll call the public meeting to order, and the purpose of this meeting is to give each member of council and the public an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to revisions to draft plan of subdivision 31T 18-001A. The application affects the properties with the municipal addresses of 40, 48, 50, 60, 66, and 72 Daly Ave in the city of Stratford. The order of procedure for this meeting is as follows. Staff will present the application, and that will be done by Jeff Bannon, staff planner. The applicant or their agent, in this case, Ms. Caroline Baker, will make a presentation on behalf of the applicant. Council may ask questions for the purposes of clarifying the application, but are cautioned not to make comments nor take a position on this application at the public meeting. The public will be asked for their presentations, comments, and questions with regard to the application. The public is advised that if a person has not provided council with oral submissions at a public meeting or a written submission before a bylaw is adopted or a decision is made, the local planning appeal tribunal has the power to dismiss an appeal. The public is also advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record for full disclosure. Each time when someone comes forward to speak, I'd ask that you state your name for the public record so it can be added in by the clerk. Are there any questions as to this order of procedure this evening? Seeing none, we'll now proceed with the meeting, and I'd invite forward Jeff Bannon, staff planner, to present the application. Mr. Bannon.
The subject lands are located between 40 and 72 Daly Avenue. The applicant has requested a revision to the original draft plan of subdivision. They are proposing 2 single-detached dwelling lots, 5 duplex lots, 5 semi-detached dwelling lots with 8 easements to provide for stormwater servicing and retaining walls on 0.6 hectares of land. They are also asking for a request to allow for future minor variance applications on the subject lands. This does not mean that council is taking a position on those applications. It just allows them, through the Planning Act, to submit those applications to the Committee of Adjustment. We've color-coded the draft plan, proposed draft plan from the applicant. Duplex dwellings are shown in green. They are on lots 1, 2, and 6. And they're located on Daly Avenue at 72 and 40 Daly Avenue. The tan-colored properties are single-detached dwellings. They're both on Daly Avenue, and they're at 50 and 66 Daly Ave. And the blue are semi-detached dwellings. They're at 60 and 48 Daly Avenue, and on lots 3, 4, and 5 on Worsley Street. The original draft plan of subdivision was approved on September in 2018. It proposed 10 single-detached dwelling lots on 0.4 hectares of land. They've expanded that area through this application, and they are now proposing to have this 8 easements with stormwater management servicing and with retaining walls in a total of 22 dwelling units. And again, they're asking for the permission for the minor variance applications. The existing use on the land is a vacant land, a duplex dwelling, a single-detached dwelling, and a single-detached dwelling with a bed and breakfast. Surrounding land uses to the north is formal central secondary school. To the east is a single-detached dwelling, which is residential, duplex dwelling to the west, and single-detached dwellings to the south. A couple of pictures show what the frontage looks like today from Worsley Street and Daly Avenue. Within the official plan is designated as residential area in Schedule A, heritage area in Schedule E. The road classifications on Daly Avenue and Worsley Street, they're both local streets. There is subject lands located directly across the street at 55 Daly Avenue, which is a designated Part 4 building. We have not received an HIA from the applicant to date. It hasn't been requested. But before we move forward with any applications, we'll be looking for a letter from a heritage consultant. And recommendations that are proposed in that letter would need to be implemented, and they'll be included in the next report of the Planning and Heritage Committee. This was an oversight of staff at the time when the original application came through. We were not aware of the heritage building across the street. We missed that, and we are looking to rectify that with this application. Zoning on the property was rezoned back in 2018, and it was for the entire subject lands. It does show on this sketch where the previous draft approved plan was and where they are now looking to revise those lands. So the previous draft approval is shown in red, and the previous draft approval is shown in black. In red is the revised plan. The lands were rezoned to include the entire property holdings. We have received comments back from several agencies. Most of the comments that have been received are either that there are no concerns or that they're technical in nature and that they'll be addressed in the Plan and Heritage Report and added as conditions if they haven't already been included in the original draft approval. There were a few engineering comments. We've included the general comments on the slide tonight because they weren't included in time for their report that was submitted. Notice of the application was sent to 65 surrounding property owners on January 13th, and it was published in the newspaper on January 18th. One resident noted that they would be providing an oral submission at this public meeting. 16 letters and emails were received prior to the submission of the report, tonight's planning report. 3 additional letters were received after the report, and one of those letters were in support of the application. The concerns that were raised relate to density, parking, traffic, construction damages that have occurred over time, the heritage character of the area, the erosion and the loss of trees on the subject lands, decrease in potential property values in the area as a result of the development, a lack of amenity space within the development, and there's concerns with safety and children that would be going to the school on the other side of Worsley Street. Planning staff will intend to review and consider these letters and comments that have been submitted, and will address each of them when we bring forward a future Planning and Heritage Committee report. I'm available to answer any questions.
Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I was going to ask, it talks about duplexes and semi-detached. I know, are they the same or different, or could you explain the difference between a duplex and a semi-detached?
Yeah, so a semi-detached is typically a side-by-side 2 units. There's opportunity to create a lot line down the middle of that property, and it creates 2 lots, one on each side with a vertical separation. Okay, duplex dwelling is typically one above each other. It is one land holding, so it's typically rented out to 2 different dwellings.
Councillor Ingram?
I wonder if you can explain what a heritage area is as defined in the official plan.
Yes, the heritage area is defined within the official plan. They are not necessarily designated properties. It is areas within the city where we look for additional controls when we're developing those lands. So we want to make sure that they're compatible. Any development is compatible with the surrounding area. Infill development fits in with the area, that it has some sort of architectural control, and the streetscape will fit in with the surrounding area for heritage dwellings.
Thank you.
Any other member of council have a question? All right, I'll invite forward Ms. Baker to present the application on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Bannon, if you'd like, there's a spot over here if you.
This would be the second one, so if you just exit out. And then onto that side one.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. My name is Caroline Baker. I'm from Baker Planning Group. I'm a land use planning consultant, and I'm here this evening to provide some additional information on the application before you for the purposes of the public meeting. As noted by Mr. Bannon, approval was received for a number of the properties in September 2018 to permit 10 residential lots. The lots were originally intended for single detached dwellings with the potential for future accessory suites. Since the approval, the applicant has acquired 40 and 72 Daly, and part of this acquisition was really to assist with the grading on the property, and by adding 2 properties on the end, which we'll get into further detail, assists in minimizing the amount of grading that needs to occur on the property. As such, there is two components being sought. First is the revised approval of the draft plan of subdivision, which would also include 40 and 72 Daly. And the second, as noted, is a request from council to issue a resolution to allow future minor variance application. Just to give a bit of background on the team, the developer is Larson Properties Partnership, the engineers are GM Blue Plan, and the surveyors are NA Engineering. I want to just spend some time on the revised draft plan of subdivision that has been submitted to the city. Here you'll see the proposed lots with the proposed residential uses, as well as the proposed easements. Mr. Bannon mentioned a total of 8 easements, and I've just highlighted for ease of viewing this evening. Pardon me, I have a cold, so I apologize if my voice cracks out on you. There are 6 proposed lots on Worsley, along with the 5 easements. This is for stormwater management, as well as sanitary, for the proposed lots on Daly. Again, this is in keeping with what was intended in the approved draft plan of subdivision, and that is being carried forward with this application. With respect to Daly, you will see that 3 of the existing structures are proposed to be retained, 2 to the west and 1 to the east. And in the middle, there are 3 new lots proposed, 2 with semi-detached dwellings and 1 with a single detached dwelling. The highlighted yellow are the proposed easements for the purposes of retaining walls. So where a retaining wall is along a property line or in very close proximity, the applicant is proposing easements to ensure that the owners of both lots can have access for maintenance. It ensures that 5, 10, 15 years down the road, should any maintenance be required, both in perpetuity have the right for maintenance. And you will see in terms of the grading, you'll see, and I apologize, I don't have a pointer, but you'll see a east-west yellow easement, and that is for retaining wall for the existing structure. And that's not only to assist with the grades, but to also to make sure that the house has a usable rear yard. So it provides for a relatively flat rear yard before the retaining wall. The new structures will be used as a retaining wall. So within the structure itself, to the walkout basement serves as the retaining function along the slope. The intention of the next graphic is to address some of the comments we've received related to parking through the circulation and discussion with city staff. You'll see highlighted in yellow are the proposed off-street parking spaces that would ensure all proposed residential uses comply with the zoning bylaw in terms of number of parking spaces provided. In addition, what we have shown, based on the proposed spacing of the driveways and pairing of driveways where possible, is the ability to maintain and provide on-street parking. The city does provide general guidelines in terms of on-street parking dimensions, which really relates to should you have any end or interior units, I apologize, they need to be 6.7 meters long, so they're a little bit longer to allow cars the ability to maneuver and back out. And what we've been able to confirm through this analysis, that we are able to achieve with off-street parking and on-street parking approximately 2 parking spaces per unit. This exceeds what the city would be requesting for a multi-unit dwelling of 1.5 parking spaces, which is inclusive of visitor, with no potential for on-street parking. Just to run through a bit of the policy, with respect to provincial policy, obviously well known, that policy is looking to support development in the built-up area with full municipal services, access to transportation, and community amenities. And it also speaks to matters of public health and safety. In my opinion, this has been addressed through the circulation and comment back from the Upper Thames. A number of years ago, there had been substantial dialogue ensuring safe access from Worsley, and the Conservation Authority has been satisfied that this can be provided. The City of Stratford official plan, it is in a residential area, permits residential uses. The proposed density as presented to you this evening is within the range permitted and will provide for development of lands as in close proximity to downtown, area schools, shopping, and parks. In my opinion, it's compatible with surrounding area, characterized as residential on varied lot sizes, ranging from 8.5 to 19.2 meters. Will assist in completing the streetscape and provide for a defined street wall on Worsley. And as noted, Upper Thames had no objections to the development of the site. Mr. Bannon did note through this revised submission that there is a designated heritage property at 55 Daly Avenue. For reference, it is located on the south side of Daly, approximately at the midpoint of the proposed development site, what would be adjacent to the lands that were previously approved for draft plan of subdivision. The heritage bylaw notes that the heritage attributes include the windows, the front door, and the cedar shingles. And the applicant is agreeable to preparing the HIA letter to assess any impacts, direct or indirect, of the development on the adjacent heritage property. The City of Stratford zoning bylaw zones the property, the site-specific R21-47. That site-specific was approved previously to the revised or the original draft plan of subdivision related to front yard setbacks, lot depth, and rear yard deck encroachments. Based on our review, the revised draft plan of subdivision complies with all zoning bylaw regulations. And I know this is probably a bit too much information, but really this is just the summary that was submitted as part of the application, analyzing each lot, the proposed use, and its compliance with lot area, lot depth, and lot frontage. The servicing strategy remains unchanged from the approved draft plan of subdivision. For sanitary, the Worsley lots will be serviced through the sanitary main on Worsley, and the Daly lots will connect via easement that was previously noted on the sketch. Similarly, for stormwater management, the Worsley lots will be serviced from Worsley. For water, Worsley lots will be serviced from Worsley and Daly from Daly, so they're not required, water's not required to be within the proposed easement. For the grading design, lots on Daly will have walkout basements, serving as a retaining wall. The lots on Worsley are intended to be back splits, and again, this is to work with the grading. Walk in on the main floor, and the back split will be up behind, will be your second story, working with the grades to try and minimize the amount of regrading or retaining walls that are required. And the drainage from the Daly lots will be directed via swale to Worsley. In summary, the development continues to assist in achieving intensification targets, providing for a range of housing choice in the City of Stratford close to the downtown. It's compatible with the surrounding area, providing for low-density residential housing in keeping with the lotting fabric, building height, and building setbacks. Appropriate servicing has been provided in keeping with City of Engineering requirements and comments, and as noted, minimizing grading through the new lots being added, and the reason for this requested revised draft plan of subdivision approval. So that ends my presentation, but I'm certainly here to answer questions, and I've just left this up as probably the best frame of reference for questions.
Members of council have a question at this time. Councillor Ingram.
Yes. Are there any other semis on Daly Ave?
To my knowledge, in the immediate proximity, there aren't any semis. I do understand there have been some dwellings that have either have converted dwellings in them or some sort of secondary unit.
And the existing duplex that Mr. Bannon referred to the east, does that front onto Worsley or does that front onto Daly?
Through the mayor, sorry, the other duplex?
The existing duplex.
I believe that's on Daly, but I will confirm for you.
Okay. And your request to allow for future minor variances, what are you anticipating needing a minor variance for?
Through the mayor, there is one lot on Worsley, and I don't believe does this have a... Looking at lot 5, in the grading design, there would be essentially the proposed attached garage would form part of the retaining wall or retaining of the grades. And essentially that would have a small projection into the required rear yard. Through the changes to the Planning Act a year or two ago, you now cannot file a minor variance application within 2 years of a site-specific zone change, and that applies across the province without a resolution from council to allow an applicant to submit a variance. So that variance request would still go through the full public process and committee of adjustment. By allowing the resolution, there's no predetermination of support or approval for the variance.
Thank you.
Councillor Vasilakos.
I had the same question with respect to future minor variances. Is that the only one that you know of, or will there be additional ones as well?
Through the mayor, that is the only one that's intended.
Councillor Gaffney, then Councillor Henderson.
Through you, Your Worship, is there parking on Worsley now?
Through the mayor, I don't believe there is parking on Worsley.
So you're expecting to make application to allow on-street parking?
Through the mayor, yes.
Councillor Henderson.
My question is, when you know there's a variance coming, why isn't it just put in with this plan? I don't understand why people go to get a minor variance when they already know ahead of time. Why don't they just bring it through with the application?
Through the mayor, under the Planning Act, the applicant is not allowed to file the minor variance application without a councillor resolution. The way the act has been written in its revision is until such time as council has made a resolution to allow a variance, that an application through the Committee of Adjustment cannot be filed. And I know, I don't mean to defer to staff, but I know I've had discussions with planning staff about when you can actually file a minor variance. And through those discussions and determination, it was that a council resolution is required before any application.
No, I meant like, why couldn't you tonight have brought that forward and not have to go for a minor variance? It would just be part of this site plan approval.
Through the mayor, the mechanism in which to request the reduced setback either has to go through minor variance or zone change. The application this evening is a draft plan of subdivision, which doesn't give us or the city the authority to permit a reduced setback.
Thank you for explaining that. And what is the blue sections? Is that retaining walls too?
Those
on
are the
Worsley?
proposed easements for the swales for stormwater
Okay.
and for sanitary to Worsley.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Councillor Burback.
Thank you. I was just wondering about sidewalk. I can see on along Worsley, it ends sort of halfway through the properties. I'm wondering what the plan is for extending that sidewalk, or if there is one.
Through the mayor, my understanding based on the engineering comments that were received today, there is requirement for extension of sidewalks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else from council? All right. Ms. Baker, if don't go too far. Members of the public wishing to make comments, ask questions, or make a presentation, if you'd like to come forward at this time. And if we could, as I said, please state your name and for the record, for the clerk.
Stephen Russell. I guess to say right away, there's been a lot of information that has happened very quickly in terms of parking on Daly Avenue, which there isn't at night, parking on Worsley, which there isn't at all, and these have gone past very quickly, and especially this time of year. There is hardly any parking in my driveway. So I just wanted to say that the information that's coming is coming very quickly. And we did this 2 years ago, and with due respect to the council and to the people here, we have to make a decision. 2 years ago, the neighbors on Daly Avenue were in the same position as we are now, ourselves regarding a new plans for Daly and Wolseley, registered plan 74. 2 years ago, after many discussions and meetings with the Larson Holdings, a decision was rendered which appeared to be satisfactory to both parties. Now it seems that we are back in square one, with even more buildings planned. The entire development being proposed will be a dense mixture of buildings, retaining walls, and easements with little space for trees and green spaces. The concern is that all of these hard surfaces will create difficulty for rainwater and moisture to be absorbed. The former plan had room for approximately 10 families, whereas this new plan, there could be as many as 20 families. 2 single dwellings, 5 duplexes, and 5 semi-detached. That's more than double the density of the 0.6 hectare land. With driveways, cars added to the mix, this will certainly create a stress not only on the environment, stress to the narrow residential street, and stress on the already established families on Daly and Worsley. It's just not sustainable. The grade of the land is steep, 25 meters down at an average of 45 degrees. The land on Worsley is a floodplain, and as we have witnessed over the past few years, climate change is bringing with it more incidents of extreme rain and flooding events. We have been accused of NIMBYism, which is certainly not the case. We feel more like hostages to the unpredictability and the optimistic of the developer that has not taken into consideration the neighborhood and the land itself. This developer has taken down trees and demolished buildings unnecessarily. We are a reasonable people, and we were able to come to an agreement 2 years ago, which was amenable to both the parties. Why are we starting over again? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any other member of the public at this time wishing to come forward for a presentation, comment, or question? Mr. Dingman?
My name is Sheila Love Phillips. I live at 15 Daly Avenue in the city of Stratford. I wish to share with your worship, the mayor, and the city of Stratford City Council the importance of trees remaining and being sustained within the proposed subdivision on Daly Avenue. Quoting City of Stratford planning documents, when subdivision planning is in progress on newly or potential land, the Building and Planning Department will direct the subdivider to plan the subdivision so that any viable existing trees on the property or tree lines must be preserved by appropriate street pattern and lot allocation design. That any proposed exception to this policy can be authorized by the Board of Park Management. As a matter of reference, the Mayor of Toronto, perhaps you know him, Dan?
Met him once or twice.
States that developers who randomly remove trees, knowing that the property is planned for annexation or subdividing, are now prosecuted with city lawyers pushing for fines of up to a maximum allowable amount of $100,000 per tree. Striking. To quote Toronto's Mayor Tory, "You can't treat random removal of trees as a cost of doing business or some minor inconvenience. If we did that, we with every subdivision proposal, we, as planners, would be left in complete chaos and there would be no trees left. This statement is clearly something for each of you to consider carefully and with your heart. What I am suggesting is that the city addresses the issue of the number of healthy century-old trees on this subject property having been deliberately removed, and the developer owner of the property in the address of the subdivision site plan, the accurate number of replacement trees with realistic, accountable timeframes for that specific activity. That means that the trees that are there now need to be respected and kept, and within the planning process, we need to know what trees are going to be applied to that subdivision and planted. And we need to make sure that the trees are appropriate to the city and to the actual plan that the subdivision has in mind. And that's my document.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dingman?
Sorry, we cannot know.
We try not to do that after a cyber attack.
Good thinking. Good evening. Tor Dingman. I'm representing the Architectural Conservancy Ontario branch, Stratford Perth County branch. I did send something through to council via email earlier, and this is a first formal opportunity I have to let you know about an open house ACO held last March 2019 here at City Hall called Streets, Trees, and Infill. The open house was in response to community outpouring of concern through a number of points. One of them were block busting in the city when developers would acquire lots together and undertake demolition and reorganize plans of subdivision. We had a great evening. I think you'll see in your package we had over 100 attendees. We had 73 people sign in. We had 53 signatures on a petition for the city to undertake consideration of a heritage conservation district in residential neighborhoods in the heritage area that's denoted in the official plan. So that's sort of standing there. It was an above-board public meeting. We have a petition that we'll be delivering to the clerk's office with 53 signatures, and we would like you to take that and consider the findings of this public event from the citizens. So that's kind of what I was going to put up, and now that's out of the way. So I'll just move on to the next part of my presentation. So as many know, in planning, Provincial Policy Statement 2014 states that significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. Well, that's great. What is heritage? We've got a heritage area, don't we, in our official plan. So we know what it is. So how do we control that? We need controls. We need some sort of restrictions in place. I think Jeff spoke, and there was a question from Councillor Ingram. Very, very little controls for single-family dwelling lots. None. Zero. There was a discussion about a demolition control bylaw. Not a heritage tool at all. In fact, it's quite recognized it's impotent, so not even on the table. I'd also like to underline that good development supports heritage preservation. We're not against it. Change has to happen. We need more housing dwelling units, but good development is always going to support heritage. So that, I think, is an important concept for all of us to keep in mind. Going back to the proposed plan of subdivision, the draft plan of subdivision, the proposed subdivision amasses 6 lots on Daly Street. That's about 33% of the block. That's block busting, no question about it. It's detrimental to the heritage fabric of our community, and it requires more control by the municipality in how it's going to be shaped. What other kind of heritage values do we have for Daly Street? Stratford identifies it as within the heritage area in its official plan. There are 2 heritage designated houses under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act on Daly Street, number 55, which was mentioned by Baker Planning, and 88, a little further down. One additional house at 19 Daly Ave, or Daly Street, is on the recent non-designated heritage register. The ACO, that's our program, our ACO plaque program, have issued 3 owners with plaques on Daly Street, number 7, number 19, and number 91. The City of Stratford lists Daly Street as a recommended heritage walk. On their website, right today, you can go and look. And on the website, they highlight the houses at 100 and 88, and on a heritage recommended walk by the City of Stratford. So we really need to have a little bit better control in our heritage area. So what I'm going to ask tonight, and I'll submit this since I don't have my slide up, it's a citizen's request. First item, Council to initiate a Heritage Conservation District study under the Ontario Heritage Act for Daly Street and the Hamlet Ward Heritage Area. 2, put in place interim controls within the study area for 1 year. This is under subsection 40 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Point 3, controls may include a hold on the approval of draft plans of subdivision applications. All demolition shall require a heritage permit from Heritage Stratford, and all new construction shall require a heritage permit from Heritage Stratford within the study area for 1 year. Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
Thank you.
I will leave this with
Tor, if what you had on that drive you wish to drop off, we can. Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other member of the public at this time wishing to come forward?
Yeah, email to the clerk.
Sure.
Would you like to go?
Oh, no, you're already there. Go ahead.
You're next. Thanks.
Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Ann Buchanan, and I live at 18 Daly Avenue since August of 1983, about 37 years. After discussions with many neighbors, can you hear me okay?
Thank you.
Several concerns relating to the proposed developments at 40, 48, 50, 66, and 72 Daly Ave have been raised, and I think I omitted number 60, pardon me. So my numbers might be a little less than they should be. Many of these concerns are the same concerns that have been raised with the governing bodies since spring of 2017. Unfortunately, now that the development has grown, the concerns have grown as well. The main problem, as I see it, is that this development proposes to build housing for the equivalent of 11 families, where before only 6 resided on Daly Avenue, a very old street, very narrow street in our center. Most families, I'm concentrating on Daly. Worsley is another issue, and other people will talk about that. Most families today have at least 2 cars, meaning that there would be a minimum of 22 cars requiring parking spaces on Daly Avenue on a daily basis. This does not account for visitors, so at times there may be more than 22. Since the lots seem to be smaller than existing city allowances allow for, it is doubtful that there would be space for double-width driveways. Most families do not enjoy juggling cars during the day, so they typically park one on the street. Daly Avenue is one of the oldest and narrowest streets in Stratford, with parking allowed only on one side. With the added number of new driveways, in combination with the law prohibiting parking in front of a driveway or in front of a driveway on the opposite side of the street, there would be very few parking spots on Daly Avenue. In the winter, this street is about a meter less in width because of accumulated snow, as my neighbor Stephen has suggested. And even in summer, 2 cars cannot meet if there is 1 car parked on the street. Imagine the potential for traffic accidents. Cars might need to back up half the length of the street to find a place wide enough to pull over and let one or the other continue on its way. This is the type of knowledge of the street that comes from residing there for many years, but is not reflected on blueprints or housing proposals. Daly Avenue presents a unique situation for construction because there is a significant drop in elevation from Daly Avenue to Worsley Street. With a steep incline, there is, of course, the problem of groundwater runoff. With a greater number of buildings than before, there are consequently more hard surfaces from driveways, house roofs, outbuildings, etc., which allows for less water absorption during the descent of the water. Also, the previous removal of about 37 mature trees, as Sheila has already alluded to, by the developer has greatly reduced water absorption and will contribute to erosion. The proposed construction of retaining walls on such a large development may help somewhat, but with such walls come potential problems as well. The walls would presumably be jointly owned, and that in itself can create problems. Who makes decisions concerning necessary repairs, and who will execute and pay for such repairs in a timely manner? The walls themselves will furthermore create more hard surfaces, creating more runoff. The properties adjoining these retaining walls face potential problems as well. The descending water will attempt to flow around the walls, causing erosion on the neighbors' properties, adjoining neighbors, through no fault of their own. And this is bound to lead to strained neighborly relations. This is another example of the type of knowledge that comes from residing in a neighborhood for almost 4 decades, but is not reflected on blueprints or housing proposals. Sewage for the proposed houses presents another problem. Because of the age of the sewer system on Daly Avenue, it cannot accept the sewage needs of the number of new dwellings proposed. Therefore, the sewage would need to be diverted to the Worsley Street system by digging the sewer pipes underneath the new Worsley Street dwellings. This would presumably require a right-of-way, or perhaps the term is easement, on the Worsley Street properties, where no outbuildings could be built and no trees could be planted. This would effectively make these properties even smaller. Daly Avenue is now a heritage area. As such, we, the existing neighbors, feel that it is important to respect that designation. Heritage districts in Stratford do not typically have modern semi-detached and duplex homes on smaller than average size lots. We would hope that some guarantee could be given, ensuring that new dwellings would be compatible with the existing streetscape before permission to build is granted. We realize that construction will take place, but please, let's not be greedy or insensitive. Daly Avenue is now a heritage area which in itself deserves some consideration. The proposed properties are situated on an extreme slope. This is not an average new subdevelopment site. There are now virtually no trees to absorb downhill water runoff. Plus, extra hard surfaces will increase this problem of erosion. There are already existing parking problems on Daly Avenue before adding these proposed dwellings and their many vehicles. Construction vehicles will present an even more serious traffic problem, especially with no parking on Worsley Street. Extra sewage lines present their own set of problems as well. Fewer dwellings than are currently proposed could reduce the environmental impact on this heritage area. I think that's what the neighborhood is really asking for, fewer dwellings. We respectfully request that the unique requirements of this parcel of land be considered before reaching final decisions. Those of us who have chosen to live in this historic part of the city respect its unique character. Please help us to preserve this heritage area of our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and Council, nice to meet you all. I'm pretty brand new to Stratford. I have just purchased 80 Daly on Friday past, and walked in on Saturday morning with some envelopes on the counter telling me that there's, I knew of some of this proposement, but I didn't know about 72, which now affects or potentially affects my new property.
If you could just, for the record, just state your name as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
My name is Bruce Proctor.
Thank you.
I'm from Toronto, and my wife and I are retiring here, and we have just purchased 80 Daly, so I am now
Welcome to
involved
Stratford.
Oh, 80 Daly.
in this process to a certain point. Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm just getting caught up to speed on a lot of the things that are going on here. So I really don't have a ton of comments other than the text that I received from my wife earlier today. And she was concerned about erosion when they're building a duplex on lot, I assume that would be lot number 1, and I'm beside them. Is that correct? Oh, I can't see. And she's also very concerned, as one of the previous ladies was talking about, trees. And we have some amazing, 100-foot pine trees right at the base of our property. And my wife Patricia is quite concerned about the damage that they may have when people are digging, and whether they'll be getting into the root systems when they're building this duplex down on the bottom end of 72. With that fact, I would hearken back to the previous gentleman. There was an agreement in place apparently for, correct me if I'm wrong, but 10 single dwellings in the past. And I 100% agree with what that gentleman was saying. If that was the agreement and let's move forward, I find this is going to create a lot of traffic, a lot of issues moving forward for that small little area. That's all I got. I'll be back and I'll be speaking more in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Yes.
Hi, my name's Pat O'Rourke. As some of you know, I'm also the chair of Heritage Stratford, but I'm not here in that capacity tonight. I also live on St. David Street, so I was one of those people who got the nice envelope from the city with 2 sheets of green paper telling me that this was going on. So I thank Council for the opportunity to speak, and thank Ms. Baker for her, as always, professional presentation on behalf of her client. We'll have some comments about some things she said. I guess as a start, this is a bit on the process. This is a public meeting, and I think 16 or 18 people took the time to write to Council as requested in the notice. But all you've received, all Council has received from those 16 letters or notes.
Having a little trouble hearing you.
Wait, sorry. All council has received from those comments is a series of bullet points, kind of a shopping list. And I haven't read all of them. I've read some of them, and I've heard people today, and people are making thoughtful, considered comments. And I think it's unfortunate that they're not fully explained or that the actual letters aren't provided to council for your information. I realize you get a ton of paper, but there's a big difference between somebody who takes the time to write several paragraphs on concerns about trees or traffic and just seeing a bullet point on a long list. And I think it is, in a sense, disrespectful that people's comments are not fully explained. And I also think in this particular case that I'm not sure council has been fully apprised of the considerations in your own official plan that are relevant to this, but I'll come back to that. A lot of what I had said in what I wrote has been addressed by other people, and I'll be short on it. One comment on density. There have been comments about the density on Daly. Right now, Worsley Street has 6 single-family homes. This will add 12. That triples the density on Worsley Street. And all but one of those will be located on the, get my directions right, on the south side of the street. The other side is the school. And that in turn leads to a traffic question. Worsley is a local street. It's narrow. As a result of the rezoning the council approved 18 months ago, the design width of the street in front of those 6 units has been reduced. And now the answer is on-street parking will be provided, even though there is no parking currently on Worsley. The street can't be made wider. Cars will be parked along it. Worsley Street is local. I'm not a parent, so I don't know how many school kids go by there every day, get dropped off. It's the only access to the parking lot for the school. There will be, no matter how you cut it, an impact on traffic. It won't be 24 hours a day, but it will be at least twice every day for 9 months of the year. And on the driveways on Daly, as somebody pointed out, that's a narrow street. The city bylaws prohibit parking immediately across from existing driveways. It will be very interesting in this plan that you saw if that had gone to the other side of Daly and shown the existing parking lots. I'm willing to place a small bet that many of the proposed parking spaces are directly across from an existing driveway, which means it's an illegal parking space. All of the comments you've heard about the density on Daly now will get exacerbated, and there may in some cases be no place to park. But I guess at the end of the day, what this really comes to is the impact on the neighborhood. And the official plan deals with intensification, infill, several places. Goals and objectives of the plan say that intensification should be compatible in scale, density, design. It also says scale must respect height, massing, and density. A little bit circular, but that's the idea. In heritage areas, the plan goes further. It says council will ensure, not that it should be, but council will ensure the heritage qualities of the area are retained, restored, and ideally enhanced. Frankly, you don't have any information in front of you that could even support a wild guess as to whether that's the case. And finally, as is noted, adjacent to a designated heritage property, there is supposed to be a heritage impact assessment, not a heritage letter, whatever that is. I frankly don't know. I am, for reasons that some people know, reasonably familiar with heritage impact assessments and what they should or shouldn't say and how they can or cannot be used to support development. A heritage letter just isn't enough. It's not enough for the provincial policy statement. It's not enough for your official plan. And at the end of the day, this is an increase in density. What was approved were 10, I guess if you count the two on the end, 12 units. Now it's 22. But from what you have in front of you, even including Ms. Baker's presentation, I don't see how you can determine whether this subdivision is compatible in scale, density, and design, height, massing, density, what its impact will be on the heritage attributes of the heritage area, what its impact will be on the heritage attributes of the adjacent property. Personally, I don't think council should even consider giving preliminary approval to a subdivision plan without having those questions addressed. And that is my respectful, so I'll go one step further. The question on Worsley Street, I think, is a traffic problem, potentially. There are studies that people do to assess that. And it's also a question that the long list of agencies that commented or didn't comment, and in terms of the Upper Thames, they did comment on the previous subdivision application, so presumably their no comment means our previous comments remain. It's floodplain. There are issues about entry height being above the floodplain. But more importantly, probably the one agency, in quotation marks, that should have some comments on this, and the comments should be sought actively, is the school board. It's their teachers, their students. They're going to have to deal with increased traffic, potentially a further narrowing of the primary road to the school, well, to school parking and a primary drop-off point. And none of that's been considered. So this request to council is that this application go back to the drawing board and come in with considerably more information, and the public have a chance to comment on that. As I think Stephen said, the plans we got didn't show what lots had semis, didn't say if the existing buildings would be retained or demolished, and I guess it's probably fair to say that most people in the neighborhood made an assumption about what would happen to those homes, and it's good to see they will be retained. But we didn't have that information. We didn't have information about retaining walls other than the easements. Hard to make comments when you don't know what's going on. So that's my request, that council look at this another time. And I agree with Councillor Henderson. The request for a variance to deal with that should be dealt with now. If you need a rezoning application, do that. What happens if it goes to the Committee of Adjustment and they say no? Subdivision plans for at least one lot, if not two, have to get revised. So you've approved something that's dependent on another body making a decision, and council, you have the nature of the Committee of a Variance, you can't overrule them. So I think that should get addressed too. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Larson. I'm the lucky fella who's standing up here today talking about this subdivision adjustment. So I just want to answer some of those questions because a lot of them were rather intriguing even on our end. And I also want to clear up some of the misunderstandings, especially from the new neighbor at 80 Daly, Mr. Proctor. So first off, as long as I can use this. Can I use this? Maybe.
Turn it on to the side.
Perfect. Point and click.
Should work.
There we go. Okay. So not everyone in the room has been here the whole time. I have. and most people that have spoke tonight have been throughout the process. So what some of the misunderstandings I think in this room, to clarify, we already have a subdivision approval from this edge through to this edge, which actually runs from what we consider to be 48, which is this lot here, through to 66, which is where I've developed our bed and breakfast. What we're looking to do from the proposed changes is create slightly higher density. That is correct. The rationale with that is the fact that A, we need housing in Stratford, and B, the size of these lots are actually oversized in comparison to the majority of everything else in the neighborhood. Also to mention, Mr. Proctor, just so you know, we already had Committee of Adjustment approvals on 7274 Daly rear lot severance, which is this unit here, which is directly behind your house, as well as the severance lot in the back of 40 Daly. However, when it became clear on the position in which we had to create the retaining walls, especially at the back of 66 Daly here, and on this section here, which is the proposal to retain the house at 40 Daly connecting to 48, we realized that we need to look at the scope as a larger picture as a whole, which then took more time for us to deal with some engineering feats, which is now what you're seeing today. That's what put us through the position of going directly to subdivision adjustment as opposed to repositioning ourselves with the Committee of Adjustments for those two separated lots. So what you're actually seeing is the full master plan as opposed to us coming to you in piecemeal, rationally because I don't want to come to you in piecemeal. I would rather you see the whole site plan. When we're referring to these three lots here, with full clarity, all three of those homes were already agreed to be built upon. And those three houses have the ability with a typical residential zoning to have a granny suite inside. What we're doing is showing you a transparent look that the plan is in fact to have two separate units on these sites. The rationalization is the fact that those lots are some 70, don't quote me exactly, but 70 plus feet in width, which is twice the size of a new typical residential lot in the community, which allows us to have quite a large frontage without creating issues, including things like parking, given the fact that we could have double wide driveways. Further to that, in relationship to the duplex below here, as well as the duplex on the sideline, the rationalization with those duplexes actually came from the original documents. We're able to fit a duplex there, which is why we've left it as a duplex. If there's a serious concern about density on this particular section in relation to Worsley, I'm going to want you to look at the intensification programs that we're all trying to create in these communities, because what we're looking for is additional housing, and what I'm giving is 6 very large lots to allow for multiple units as opposed to 7 single-family development lots that I've already been approved for. To me, that allows for additional individuals to live downtown and potentially have items. Individuals potentially have things like no cars. They also potentially have single living, being that they're on their own, so they might only have one vehicle or not have a vehicle at all. It allows for some customization as well as split houses. You can have a unit in the back, unit in the front. On top of that, I just want to clarify, this house here at 66 Daly has been completely overhauled. It's a bed and breakfast. It's a beautiful house. We bought it, gutted it, kept all the heritage features inside, and refinished it off. It's beautiful. 7274 has just come in a completely internal remodel. One of the units was done before we purchased it. And the second unit, which was the closest side to 66, has just been redone, and we now have long-term tenants in there, which I believe you met today. Is that correct? Okay. 40 Daly, we have building permits already done. The reason why we haven't started construction on it is a lot to do with how we're going to put these driveways in, which is why we're sitting here today, because I don't want to put this driveway in, which I've already been approved for, until I know that this is going to be a semi and not a single detached, because it's going to change how the driveway gets laid out on this end. Furthermore, trees. I definitely erred in judgment when I took the trees down without asking any questions. I also want to be totally clear that I am the first person to talk about it on a regular basis online about creating a tree bylaw, and randomly enough, Caroline Baker, who is my planner, is also sitting on that same committee. So it's not something that I am rawing about. I made a misjudgment. I was 27 years old. I'm also not taking any more trees down. We have an arborist report requirement through this subdivision before we touch any of the additional trees on site. Furthermore, with subdivision applications, the city will be more or less forcing me through their own means to put in a tree on every new property line, which means there's going to be trees being placed regardless of whether or not I want them there. I just want to be clear on that. In terms of two of the major questions that you had brought up, Ms. Buchanan, This is completely within sight lines of this particular house, being the retaining wall. We did that on purpose because I'm planning on keeping that house. The retaining wall can then be directly and 100% on one site to allow for any liability to be faced on the one individual. It will share on these, which these are actually a driveway unit, so you can kind of see the driveway component here, and this will be a driveway wall almost identically built to what we already have here, which is at 66. The reason why we did that is because, well, if we're going to build a driveway, we might as well build the retaining wall inside the driveway and have it done in one shot. The last thing I want to comment is the size of these houses in comparison to where they were. When we showed you this original plan, which was approved last September, it showed 3 houses. It showed one very large 2-story house, which is the house that we were intending on building right here. And when I say large, I mean it was a 3-level back split and it had a granny suite inside of it, because our intention is our mother-in-law eventually is going to have to live with one of us, and I get to be that person. This was already preconceived and built and also had a granny suite inside of it in the basement. Identical reasons. The individuals that looked to purchase it were the age of 55 plus, and they also have an elderly mother. And this unit here was a single Ontario cottage style house with a attached garage. We went with the proposed semi-looks mainly to give individuals opportunities, because both of these individuals that look to purchase these houses are no longer building there. They're building on another site. So now we are kind of restarting from scratch in terms of who's going to build. Delays like these type of items, which this particular delay was completely on engineering processes, which was up to our consideration, oftentimes leaves the individuals that want to buy looking for something else because they can't wait to live. So these 3 lots were already going to be put in place. So I understand when we're talking about the amount of density that we're putting on streets and the streetscapes and how I'm going to fill in with more residents than what we currently have. I just want to be totally aware that there was already 5 lots here. We're trying to fit another house in on an oversized lots, and to top it off, I've left 3 of the 5 houses. We've also restored one of them. We've finished restoring a second one, minus the little back section that has to come off of this house because it's going to fall down. And we're going to be renovating this one this spring. So in terms of heritage qualities, which I'm not against what Tor Dingman would say, I would also rebuttal the fact that ACO is also the exact same firm that asked me to protect the White House, and I'm now in a negotiation perspective, given the fact that our severance occurred, that I am designating the White House as it currently stands today, being refinished as it is with the yellow and red brick. So when people say to me that I'm not aware of heritage, I'm the one who restored that house. That was me. That was my choice. And I fought the whole way up the hill in order to achieve that. I also now restored 66. So if you're going to come with me to an heritage concept, which I'm not against whatsoever, let's try and please work together on the solution as opposed to apart. No one has ever mentioned heritage qualities in any of these 3 houses to me until today. Although I'm aware of it, I was the one who kept the banisters in this house and replaced the windows. So let's have this conversation. I am a human being. If you have issues with what we're trying to develop, let's chat. Any questions? I don't know if I'm allowed.
No, so if you want to have your own neighborhood meeting, you can go do that on your own time.
I was referring to council.
No problem. Members of council, thanks.
Can I ask a question?
No, you're not going to ask a question to him. No, no. This is a public meeting for members to give their input on the application, and what we'll do is we'll continue to have presentations from members of the public on the application. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thanks. Oh, one last comment. The school board did receive all of our information, and their response was no comment, just so we're aware.
Yeah. All right. Other members of the public wishing to make a presentation at this time, please come forward. Thank you.
Hi. For the record, my name's John Lederman, L-E-D-E-R-M-A-N. I live at 15 Worsley Street. In this issue, I have a hard time knowing where to stand because I stand with both Mr. Larson and I also stand with the residents. I think they both have very valid points. The heritage points are open to discussion now. I'm really glad to hear that. I think we need to do that. They certainly don't need to go on a year's moratorium, because where I stand with Mr. Larson is this case has gone on for close to 3 years now. It's gone through an OMB hearing. It has cost hundreds of thousands of dollars just for those properties, and they're still empty. It's time for a decision to build them and put something there. In terms of design, I think something tasteful can be done. That question needs to be answered and perhaps can be addressed in meetings with Mr. Larson in a cooperative nature that he's indicated he's ready to do, and the neighbors have also indicated they're ready to sit down with him. So I think I'm urging that we proceed with a decision and some discussions and get on with it.
Thank you. Any other member of the public at this time?
Mr. Mayor, councillors, I'm Rick Adams, 50 St. Vincent Street South. My wife and I wrote to you a couple of weeks ago about this matter, and I'm grateful for the responses that we received back. I can tell you that feeling is running high. Neighbours have been communicating online a lot. 3 of our neighbours submitted letters to council but are unable to be here tonight. However, they've each sent a short note requesting that they be heard, and I'd like to read those for you. The first is from Anthony Jordan and Kimberly Hurley, the owners of Keystone Alley, Briar House, and the Little Green Grocery. As homeowners on Daly Avenue, we are contacting you this evening to voice our concerns about the subdivision of the Daly Avenue lots. Daly Avenue is a narrow 2-lane road. It cannot handle the increase in traffic this proposal would bring. The road has already seriously deteriorated substantially in the 4 years we have lived here. There will also not be enough parking on the street for the proposed lots, in addition to the already approved lots. As it stands, we are already having constant issues getting out of our driveway without damaging the cars parked on the other side of the street. This has also become dangerous when cars are traveling at speed down Daly towards St. Vincent when other cars are parked opposite. Then it becomes a narrow single-lane road. We have 3 young children that are often playing outside, and the excess traffic is an enormous concern to us for the safety of our children. We also feel that asking neighbours in the city to agree to future minor variances without knowing what they are is very concerning. How can we agree to something if we have no idea what the application is for? Unfortunately, the applicant's track record of sticking to his word is a bad one. Again, we are strongly opposed to these subdivisions on our street. This is a heritage neighbourhood. It just cannot handle 22 new dwellings, parking, traffic, and sanitary requirements for this influx of people. In conclusion, we request that Council deny permission for this development until a heritage impact assessment can be completed, and we look forward to the outcome of that assessment. Sincerely, Anthony and Kim. The second letter is from Lynn McCarthy. I'm the owner of 91 Daly Avenue, and I wish to register my serious concerns in respect to the proposed development on our street. Daly Avenue is made up of single-family detached dwellings. High-density housing is not in keeping with any of the other properties in the vicinity. Stratford's economy benefits considerably from the tourist trade, with the heritage aspect of the city being a key attraction to many visitors. Daly Avenue is on the Heritage Walk circuit, and having new build, high-density properties in this area would significantly diminish the heritage neighbourhood. As a Daly Avenue owner, I'm unaware of whether the city has taken steps to carry out an impact assessment of the increased traffic and parking challenges that the development would undoubtedly cause. If such an assessment has been carried out, the city must be transparent and effectively communicate the outcome with residents. The developer has not made an attempt to inform neighbours and residents of intended plans to this time, or seek to find ways where concerns can be heard and possible compromises reached. Council, this proposal seriously affects one of the beautiful old streets in our city. Where else will be next? Please show us that you're serious about protecting the interests of residents and the city as a whole, and not just those of the developer. Lynn McCarthy, 91 Daly Avenue. The final note is from Brian Reed. I live at 54 St. Vincent Street South. I was the former Deputy Director of Building and Planning with the City of Stratford in the 90s. I do believe that Council has not done an adequate job in properly protecting heritage areas in Stratford, but this proposal now does present an opportunity to rectify this. Daly Avenue is a beautiful, mature street with many architecturally significant homes, some of which are over 100 years old. The residents of Daly have had to put up with this siege on their doorstep, which has seen the mass destruction of mature trees. Now we face the proposed development of high-density semis and duplexes. These are entirely incongruous in a heritage area. In addition, there is no street parking currently allowed on the adjacent streets of St. Vincent or Worsley, which means that there is always an overspill of vehicles parked on Daly Avenue. Daly is a narrow street, only 2 lanes wide. The proposed development would add a significant amount of permanent extra traffic, as well as significantly exacerbating the on-street parking problems. If the development was purely for single-family homes on Daly, in keeping with the rest of the street, the extra parking would not be an issue and residents would probably accept this. But for semis and duplexes, the road is simply not built for that density of traffic and parking. Semis have been built in recent years on Norman Street between Huntingdon and Foreman, and I have noticed the extra congestion this has created on that street. But the big difference is Norman is 3 lanes wide, which does allow room for vehicles to pass in a single lane when cars are parked down each side. The condition of the road surface on Daly has also heavily deteriorated as a result of the enormous trucks that were going up and down as part of the tree clearance and demolition. I'd like to know if Council has obtained estimates for the costs of resurfacing the road if this development were to go ahead. In summary, I urge Council to reject this proposal as it stands and to investigate the implementation of measures that actually preserve our city's heritage before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public wish to make a presentation at this time? Any other members of the public? All right. Well, I thank you all very much for your comments. At this time, does Ms. Baker have any closing comments on behalf of the applicant? Thank you. So City Council intends to consider this application at a future Planning and Heritage Committee meeting where members of Council will have an opportunity for full discussion of the application after reviewing comments received from the public. If anyone would like to receive further notice of this application, please leave your name and address on the form of the table immediately adjacent Councillor Gaffney. We'll adjourn for a 10-minute recess and take a break. Members of the public have an opportunity to fill out that form, and I thank you all very much for your indulgence. Thank you. everyone. We'll reconvene at this time.
So people don't walk away thinking blah, 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 you know.
Madam Clerk?
So through you, Your Worship, moving on to item 7, orders of the day. Item 7.1 is a proclamation with a motion that City Council hereby proclaims February 17th as Heritage Day in the City of Stratford in celebration of our past and our future, and inspire Canadians to embrace, explore, and enjoy our enduring heritage.
Motion by Councillor Ingram, second by Councillor Burback. Discussion. I want to thank the youth for your patience, and you've got the opportunity to sit through a little over an hour and a half of democracy, and I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Thank you for your efforts very much. Anything further? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed, if any? And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Moving to item 7.2, which is a resolution for municipal significance, and there's a motion that City Council hereby designates the Stratford Blues and Rib Fest to be held June 19th to 21st in the York Street parking lot and on Veterans Drive as having municipal significance for the purpose of obtaining liquor licenses from the AGCO, subject to the necessary permits being attained, compliance with the city's municipal alcohol risk policy, and the required certificates of insurance being provided.
Moved by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Henderson. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Moving on to item 7.3, which is with regards to the municipal accommodation tax. There is a lengthy recommendation on your agenda for your consideration.
So moved. Councillor Clifford and Councillor Gaffney moving and seconding. Discussion. Councillor Seven.
Yeah, I have two concerns about the motion. First, as I commented when this idea initially came to council, my concern is that this has come to council and the ball has started in motion without a real discussion of whether this is good for the city or not. My feeling now, as it was then, is that if we move further into setting framework or public consultation before we have a fulsome discussion on the matter, the discussion will skip prematurely to how to implement the tax rather than should we implement the tax. And second, this idea was brought forward during budget discussions with the main purpose of revenue for the city. My issue with this is that once implemented, the money will most likely in time be indistinguishable in the budget and will provide less incentive for current and future councils to spend responsibly rather than to lower future tax increases, which is what I feel to be the current guise this initiative is under. And so I'm going to vote against the motion for those reasons.
Thank you. Mr. Humble, can you speak just to the matter of how the fund will be allocated and shown within the city's reserve funds?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. So the municipal accommodation tax has to be split 50-50. We have to fund tourism-related services with 50% of the revenue we raise, and the other 50% of funds have no restrictions. So they would be available for the municipality to use as they wish. Since this would be a new program for the city, we're proposing that for the first 1 year, perhaps 2 years, that revenue be directed towards a reserve fund until we get a good idea of how much revenue could come in. It's very difficult to budget for a number without any certainty as to what revenue. So for the first year or two, money would the city's portion, the 50% that the city could retain, would be directed to a reserve fund, and the 50% that has to be used for tourism services can be used to offset the city's payment towards STA, or again, subject to council's direction, that too could also be directed to a reserve fund for the first year or two.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Burback.
If this does move forward, I would like to see us consider that the Stratford Tourism Alliance would no longer be a membership-based alliance, and that because they will be getting a chunk of tax money, that they should no longer be member-based, and they should be representing all of the tourism-related activities that happen in Stratford. Right now, they don't necessarily support you if you are not a member. So I think it's very important for us to make that clear, that the Stratford Tourism Alliance would look at switching their model so that it's no longer a membership-based.
Thank you. Councillor Gaffney.
Through you, Your Worship, Mr. Humble, approximately how much of their revenue is created by their membership-based requirement or membership-based contributions to the amount the city contributes from the tax base?
Through the chair, the only number I have with me this evening is what the city contributes to STA, and that's about 609,000 in 2020. I don't have with me the STA budget. All we are presented with is what they require to be subsidized by the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Yeah, I believe it's somewhere in the region of about $100,000 for members. That's an approximate, but it's in that area.
Thank you.
Anything further? If not, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed, if any? 2 opposed, that's carried. Thank you.
Moving on to item 7.4, which is a resolution regarding the climate emergency declaration. Again, there is a lengthy recommendation on your agenda for your consideration, and as noted, there are a few delegations who've requested to speak on this item.
Thank you. Councillor Burbeck? You're moving that Ms. Reimer, Ms.
To hear the
Thank you.
delegation.
Seconder? Councillor Henderson? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I'd invite Ms. Reimer forward.
Hello, my name is Anne Marie Reimer.
I'm Ann Carpert. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Matheson and City Council, for this opportunity to speak. On September 20th, 2019, as a concerned grandmother and citizen of Stratford, I collected over 170 signatures in a few hours on a petition to you to declare a climate emergency. Someone once said, activism is the beating heart of a democracy. And this petition sprang from 2 movements at this historic time: the Climate Strike movement in conjunction with the Fridays for Future movement and the Declaration of Climate Emergency movement. The Climate Strike movement is one built mostly by youth, sparked by Greta Thunberg and passionately taken up by other young people around the world, including our speakers today that will be following us, Rachel Stephen and Emily Adam. They, along with other students, were leaders of our local Climate Strike March and Echo Fair on September 20th, 2019. At that time, 100 students marched from the high schools, 40 volunteers participated, and close to 300 people attended the rally in the square. The community is ready to work with the city on meaningful action responsive to the scale of the problem. A declaration of climate emergency acknowledges the urgency of the warnings given to us by scientists regarding catastrophic effects of climate change, and they stress the urgent need for taking immediate measures to mitigate, draw down, and stop greenhouse gases. Declarations began in 2016 in Australia, and since then, over 1,500 jurisdictions, cities, municipalities, countries have declared a climate emergency that now involves over almost a billion people worldwide. Our Parliament declared a climate emergency in July 2019. It was non-binding. Canada's emissions targets under the Paris Agreement are projected to fall far short at the current rate. In fact, climateactiontracker.org projects our emissions to be as high as 27% higher than the 1990 levels by 2030. In contrast, the IPCC timeline requires 45% reduction from 1990 levels by 2030 and zero carbon by 2050. Not only governments, small and large, are declaring climate change as a new lens through which to view practices and policies, but many other institutions, such as churches, social organizations, and those in the financial world. Recently, BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, announced January 14, 2020, that the firm would make investment decisions with environmental sustainability as a core goal. Many of our surrounding municipalities have acknowledged our climate emergency with declarations. Goderich, Kitchener, London, Waterloo. An article on KitchenerToday.com states, municipalities are leading the way on low-carbon solutions, from building retrofits to green infrastructure. And with municipalities influencing half of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, scaling up local solutions is key to meeting Canada's climate target. I understand that Stratford is already in the midst of developing a climate action plan with a climate action coordinator. And in the current and previous initiatives as listed in the management report attached to this agenda, we see examples of effective actions such as improving the climate resiliency of the current housing stock, and future plans like replacing the refrigeration system at the Rotary Complex. Refrigerants are high on the list of greenhouse gases. This would be an excellent action. According to Dr. Sachs, former Environmental Commissioner of Ontario, every dollar spent on climate mitigation results in $2 in health benefits. The act of declaring a climate emergency would be a very powerful opportunity to include those plans and projects within a climate emergency framework. Mayor, Council, I urge you to not only declare a climate emergency, but to view any future policies and plans through the lens of climate change, and that climate change be a top priority in all decisions in this city.
And I will speak briefly to a few points, a point of urgency and a quick look at the declaration text that you have before you from staff. Acknowledging the urgency of the climate crisis and getting the community on board with emergency action is extremely important. Many people concerned about climate change and supportive of climate action are still not aware that significant reductions in human-caused greenhouse gas emissions are needed so quickly, 10 years, as you've heard and see in the report. I am pleased that this declaration is before you tonight, and we can look forward to a measurable action plan. I support City Council and citizens of Stratford to start new efforts for emission reductions now by identifying some quick wins or accelerated actions that do not need to wait for a fully completed implementation plan, and also by locating responsibility for follow-up on this declaration with the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee and designated city staff that Council sees fit. There are good suggestions for immediate priorities in the management report, as Anne-Marie touched on a few. That could make a good difference. And we would also suggest, other ideas will come, but retrofitting priorities could include Festival Hydro assisting low and middle income households with energy efficiency retrofits. And we would also encourage immediate exploration of more transportation related solutions, since the vast majority of Stratford's greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation, particularly privately owned vehicles. Looking at the climate emergency declaration text that you are considering this evening, we're pleased with how much scientific content is in the preamble, including the acknowledgement of the threats to communities, human health, animals, and ecosystems, of the fact that Canada is warming twice as fast as other parts of the world, and the need to significantly reduce human-caused emissions within 10 years. Our suggestions to the text are two, for you to discuss as you see fit or not. To strengthen the commitment of this declaration, we would like to see a clear goal to achieve a carbon neutral city by 2050, which is a date that is mentioned in the management report, or at least a commitment to carbon neutrality on an urgent timeline. And we also offer a suggestion that the declaration could include a timeline for confirming a 2030 emissions reduction target. We understand this declaration was modeled on Kingston and London's climate emergency declarations, which didn't include targets, but both cities established some targets in 2014, and Kingston has since accelerated its targets. Without at least a timeline for determining our 2030 target, we feel this declaration does not help us move towards significant reductions with urgency. And so we propose that it could include a direction that the ITS committee or staff present council with a proposed 2030 target within 3 months from now. I understand from the Perth County Climate Change Coordinator that our community target will likely need to be around a 40% reduction of emissions from the levels she's estimated on 2017 data in order to do our part on what's needed in this 10-year time frame. And her community greenhouse gas inventory for Stratford is complete, and it should not be that difficult to confirm a target in a relatively short span of time. So we thank you for listening to these comments and suggestions. In conclusion, we will hear from 2 student leaders next. And I remind the adults in the room that the youth climate leaders here and around the world are not seeking to give us hope or inspiration. They don't want our praise for their organizing skills or their speaking skills or their determination. They are calling on us to take responsibility, to take meaningful action, and to do so before it is really too late.
Excuse me. We are at a unique stage in history. Never before have we had such an awareness of what we are doing to our planet, and never before have we, you, had the power to do something about that. That is a quote from David Attenborough. And on behalf of my grandchildren, I thank you.
I'd invite forward Emily and Rachel at this time.
Hello everyone, my name is Emily Adam and this is Rachel Steffen. We are both local high school students here in Stratford, and we are here today to present in support of the Climate Emergency Declaration.
A climate emergency is a moral commitment to act against the current climate crisis. The environment will be provided with maximum protection through citywide implementations, and City Council should become an advocate for the environment, as well as consider it at the forefront of all municipal decisions.
On an international scope, climate change will cause issues such as rising sea levels, which will displace millions of people, increased rates of tropical diseases, ocean acidification, which will harm aquatic ecosystems and those that depend on them, and species endangerment due to new environmental stresses. It is important to note that the poles are warming much faster than the rest of the globe, which includes northern Canada. Many effects of climate change will have a direct impact on Stratford, with many more having indirect impacts. Because of this, it is important that Stratford does their part in building a sustainable future.
To emphasize the severity, with the current international climate situation, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year, according to the World Health Organization.
Stratford needs a climate emergency declaration and a following plan of action. It is predicted that in Stratford, the number of days above 30 degrees Celsius will increase by 17.3 days for 2021 to 2025, according to climateatlas.ca. There are also the expected issues of increased flooding of the Avon River and local watershed, increased health issues, specifically heat and respiratory-related illnesses, and decreased agricultural production. Agriculture is especially important to Stratford, as many residents and surrounding populations depend on it both as a source of food and a source of income. Climate change will cause significant food insecurity, as the yield and ideal type of crop will become unpredictable. A declaration will help minimize the effects of climate change by providing support for local initiatives, and creating a proper community mindset for change.
Stratford will not be the first city to declare a climate emergency. Many cities across Canada, such as Vancouver and Edmonton, which is pictured here, have already declared one. Many local cities have declared one as well, including Guelph, Toronto, Goderich, and Kingston.
However, declaring a climate emergency cannot be the end. The next step is an implementation plan. A rhetorical declaration is pointless and does not incorporate the action plan necessary to actually combat climate change. Unfortunately, this is what many cities have done. To be meaningful and effective, a declaration must be followed with action. Change does not come from the declaration itself, but from what we choose to do with it and how we incorporate it into our decision-making process.
Immediately following a declaration, Stratford needs to issue a plan of action targeting key areas. Transportation comprises a large majority of Stratford's emissions. Therefore, transportation should be a key issue focused on in the implementation plan. Other areas to focus on include single-use plastics and the health of our river and the local watershed. We can also consider building efficiency. At the same time, Stratford needs to consider working towards a larger goal, such as carbon neutrality in a semi-near future. City Council can have a large impact on the success of such initiatives by supporting this agenda. It needs to be noted that future goals have to be achieved in a not-so-distant future. This is an emergency. The IPCC states we only have 10 years left until irreversible damage is caused by climate change. Our time and resources need to be used wisely. It is imperative this issue is treated as an emergency and is a prominent topic in our community. It can't be pushed aside and needs to be dealt with as quickly as procedures will allow.
Stratford does have an influence. As a tourist destination, we are noticed. By doing it right and following a declaration with an effective action plan, we can pressure other cities to do the same. When positive changes are already occurring at the municipal level, it makes it much easier to pass the necessary legislations and policies at the provincial and federal level, where more impactful changes can be made. Although making changes to our city can have a direct positive impact on the environment, the best way for us to make a difference is by pressuring higher powers to commit to an environmentally friendly future.
This declaration is what Stratford wants. The corresponding online petition has received over 900 supporters, increasing from when our documents were submitted at noon today, where it came under 900. We also had submitted a physical petition on September 20th following the climate march. This support is reflected in Stratford's growing eco-conscious culture. There are many local businesses, projects, and community groups that focus on or incorporate green living in their affairs. There are many people behind us who are ready for action, including Rotary representatives, members of the Canadian Federation of University Women, and anyone here in green today. We have also submitted a list of some of our supporters and their concerns. We are ready for change. Are you? Thank you very much.
Members of Council. Councillor Vasilakos.
Okay, so I just had a couple comments. I'm in support of the declaration, but just as the students just pointed out, I'm a practical person, and making the declaration in the absence of taking any action is useless. I'm also not a huge fan of what we call aspirational goals, where we say we're going to do something that's not possible without actually showing how it's possible. So if it is the intention of our resolution to aim for a goal of net zero by 2050, then I do think we should include it in the declaration if that is one of the goals, or if we have a 50% by 2030 or something. I think there is some value in setting a target. Setting the target of net zero by 2050 is a lot of municipalities have actually done that. I think that's something the municipalities can work on together. I think it's reasonable. So I would like to see that added to the resolution is sort of this target of 2050 at net zero. But and another part is that action plan. I am very much in favor of actually having an action plan that has targets both by reduction but also targets on individual components of the action plan. If we have an action plan to electrify or green our fleet through the city, that action item should have a timeline associated back to that we can then actually quantify and check back on. And any plan that we have should be iterative in that we have a plan and it's a living document where we're always coming back to it and adjusting it and using expertise that's available to modify it as we need to. It can't be just a static document. So, but the other piece that I'm hoping for is we don't have to wait for a plan. When we go through and we see the things that the city are already doing, what departments are already doing in terms of action on environment and decisions that we make, there are a lot of decisions that we make that staff make every day that can actually be filtered through an environmental lens, and they already do it. There are best practices within their area of expertise. There's toolkits through FCM. There's all sorts of opportunity to start now and start building that into the things that we do. And so while I actually am in favor of an action plan that is formalized in the 2021 budget, I would like to see something within this resolution or redirect staff to actually start thinking about these things now, looking to their to people in neighboring municipalities that are working within their same departments and saying, what are they doing? What are some of the things that we're doing that we can bring to council earlier than the plan? So how do we start working now? Because I know we already saw the list of things that the city has done and is thinking of doing, and we know we can start earlier than that. So we'll let everybody else talk, but then I maybe will add those few items to move that resolution.
If I could frame it before others speak, I think there's two pieces. There's the resolution, then there's the short-term strategy, departmental-wise, that I think should go back and have staff come back with a report to your committee, which you actually chair. Then there's the longer-term strategy around 2050 targets, which I think then becomes part of an ongoing budget strategy. So I would think we'll deal with it in those ways, but there's probably three motions there.
Yeah, glad to make them 1, 3, 5, or whatever gets it done, but thank you, yes.
No problem. I just want to help the rest of us frame it. Councillor Gaffney, then Councillor Clifford.
I'm going to move the staff recommendation.
Okay.
As step number 1.
Okay, Councillor Vasilakos, you'll second that.
As item number 1, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's okay to have targets, but we have to have costs too. So as the Paris talked about, I think we have to have a report back, and that's all I was going to add to it.
So dealing with the resolution first, and then we'll go to the next two pieces of it. Anything further on this? Councillor Henderson.
Well, I'll just mention that Energy and Environment's been working very hard on this. Our last meeting was just actually only this. We're dealing on the proper steps, and we've taken the roundtable report, and we're basically calling it a community action report now, and so that'll be coming forward quite shortly.
Okay. Councillor Burback.
So Councillor Vasilakos said a lot of the things I was planning to say, so I won't go over them again. So is it my understanding that we're adding the net zero by 2050 into this resolution? Is that correct? Or is that an amendment to the resolution?
I was thinking what we would do would refer to staff to bring back a net zero by 2050 strategy within 3 months. And that allows them to look at departmentally what they're already doing and how they could task to start working towards it.
Okay. Could we tag on to that also having a target for 2030 as well? Because we will get back the climate, that report we're getting back from our climate coordinator, which will have information. We should be able to make a target fairly quickly.
Yes. All right. Councillor Sebin.
Thank you. So I support this. I'm happy to see some of the possible commitments, what they could include. I just wanted to comment that, additionally, that studies show that the impact on the planet from animal products, even those sourced locally, is much greater than plant-based alternatives. It's estimated that when a person eats plant-based for just 1 month, 33,000 gallons of water, 900 square feet of forest, and 600 pounds of CO2 emissions are spared. I would like to add to the list of commitments that events and meetings for city staff where food is provided that plant-based food account for a meaningful amount, if not all of it, with the idea that by making this declaration, we'll lead by example to address climate change, not only as a city, but as an employer. And finally, I'd like to see the proposed community awareness campaign include promotion of a plant-based diet.
Okay. If I could take that off the side, I think we want to stay very supportive of the resolution. I think many of the iterations that we've started to come to should be part of a longer-term strategy that over the next 3 months we talk about and come back to adopt, if that's okay. But your comments are very noted. Councillor Ingram.
This also might be part of a secondary motion, but further to the targets for 2030 and 2050, when that management report comes back, I'm wondering if we can incorporate in all of our management reports, just as we have in a financial impact section and in the alignment with the strategic priorities, I'm wondering if we can include a section that also meets our climate action plan.
Yes. All right. All right, on to the motion at hand that's been moved by Councillor Gaffney and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos, as printed on page 5 and the top of page 6. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous, and that passes. On a referral back... On a referral back to staff to come up with targets for 2030, 2050, and various strategies for the city to lead and make changes in operations. Moving that back to staff would be Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Burback. Thank you. And all the iterations of the ideas that everyone brought forward can be debated and looked at, including plant-based opportunities. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And the third item is that a longer-term budget strategy with regards to city procurement and opportunities around strategic goal setting be looked at for the 2021 budget and beyond. Moved by Councillor Ingram and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Vasilakos.
I just had a quick question. I just had a quick addition to that, there's a corporate strategy and there's a community strategy. And so those can be rolled in together. The corporate strategy could have financial things that have to do directly with city, transit and fleet management and buildings and those kinds of things. But then there's a community strategy where we could set money aside for things like helping homeowners or improving. So I just want to point out that strategy just doesn't have to be limited to the corporation, but can set aside some finances for promoting it outside into the community.
Okay. And the mover and seconder agree with adding that? And the clerk notes that is to be included as well. All right. Any further discussion? Councillor Gaffney.
I don't quite understand that.
It would be an opportunity to look at whether there's provisions of service such as Festival Hydro and other areas where we can encourage these types of strategies to be widely adopted, not just in the city operations, but other ways.
No, I understand that. Thank you, Your Worship.
And I summarized 3 minutes into about 10 seconds. All right. Anything further? All those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. For those that would like to stay, we're entering hour number 3. For those that would like to leave, we'll take just a minute and let you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to grab one. I like your addition. That's good. Getting it on here. I do like that because, as I said, I noticed with some of our projects, we don't make it part of it. Like we should.
What are you going to do about our tax rate when this is this environmental stuff? You want to lower the taxes and stuff.
Look at that little one, Scott, my future. That little sign says my future. We got got some work ahead of us.
We'll call the meeting back to order if we could.
That was a good compromise, eh?
All
I'm
right.
surprised when I read that.
Next item, clerk. Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, moving on to item 7.5, which is a resolution regarding a tender award update. There is a staff recommendation that tender T 2019-49 be awarded as follows. That 1877980 Ontario Inc., also known as Kodiak Tree Services, is awarded the removal of trees and stumps in 2020 in the amount of $63,994.16, including HST. And that Langbros Tavistock Limited is awarded the regular overtime and emergency pruning in 2020 up to the amount of $202,500, including HST.
Moved by Councillor Ritzma and seconded by Councillor Gaffney. Discussion. Councillor Gaffney.
I'd like to congratulate staff for coming up with a pretty good solution to what was a pretty complicated issue. I would like to ask a question on clarification, Your Worship. Why is this item 17 included in the report?
I'll ask Mr. Malott to come forward and he can speak to item 17 in the report. From Ms. Thompson, Ken?
What is it?
Sorry.
Where's he seeing that?
In a discussion with the manager, we did identify that this was a clause that was included in the tender that was issued, and we felt it was important for council to be aware. So we brought it forward with respect to this particular report, so that you are aware that you can split the tender that originally went out as a single tender, and I would call on the manager, Your Worship, if he had any additional comments.
Mr. Malott, no. Yes.
I have a question that may go to something a little more involved than the manager. This clause, has an attorney looked at this clause?
Yes.
Has the attorney assured
Dave,
us?
can you pull your mic back, please?
Sorry. Has our attorney assured us that somehow this would prevent us from being sued when we award a contract to the non-lowest bidder?
I think it's safe to say that if a solicitor has reviewed the document and approved it for use, that they believe that they've mitigated any risk we would have against litigation.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anything further? If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried.
Moving on to item 7.6, which is a resolution regarding the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and there is a staff recommendation that the Corporation of the City of Stratford accepts the proposal from DPRA for the undertaking and preparation of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan for Stratford, St. Mary's, North Perth, West Perth, Perth East, and Perth South for a total cost of $152,250, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to execute all documents necessary with respect to the acceptance of the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson and Councillor Burback moving and seconding. Discussion. If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
There is no business for which previous notice has been given, so moving on to Section 9, which is reports of the standing committees. Item 9.1 is the report of the Planning and Heritage Committee, and there are 3 items listed for consideration as follows. Item 9.1.1 to approve zone change application Z10-19 for 3194 Vivian Line 37. Item 9.1.2 is zone change application with a recommendation that staff be directed to work with developers during the site plan approval process to ensure any removed trees are replaced on site where possible. And item 9.1.3 is OPA 03-18, 31T-18-003, and zone change application Z1018 for Countryside subdivision. And as outlined on the agenda, Councillor Ingram has requested an amendment to the committee recommendation in the form of an additional condition as outlined. And 2 amendments have also been proposed for conditions 50 and 62. So the recommendation and those proposed amendments are listed for your consideration and are available on your desk.
And I will note that I'll ask them to be taken separately, 911 and 912, because I declared an interest in 913. Any mover and a seconder for 911 and 12? Councillor Ingram and Councillor Burback. discussion. Councillor Seven.
I just had a question about 9.1.3 and the...
We're gonna do that separately, and I'm going to turn the
Right,
chair over.
sorry.
Sorry. No
Thanks.
problem. Thank you. Any questions on 911 or 912? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Turned over to the Deputy Mayor.
So at this time, I'm going to entertain a motion for 9.1.3. And Councillor Ingram, would you move that with the amended piece?
I would, and then I'd like to provide further direction with respect to proposed condition 71, please.
Okay, could I get a seconder for that? Councillor Burbach, thank you.
Yes, so
Questions or comments?
when it says to the satisfaction of the city engineer, the intent behind this condition is that medium density block in the northwest corner will not be provided with transit at this time. So those folks have to actually walk along this path all year long to the intersection of Fraser and McCarthy, and that's why they will meet transit. So that path needs to be accessible 4 seasons. So that those people can actually get there. And then it also needs to be lit so that it is safe, because 3 seasons of the year after 7 o'clock at night, it is dark. And for the span of that path, the street lighting will not be enough. So there does need to be lighting, and it does need to have snow removal and be hardscapes so that it is accessible 4 seasons of the year.
Thank you. Councillor Seven, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had a question about 71 as well, sort of around it. Given that they would have the ability to create the 4-season trail, are the requirements or what's needed to create a road so different? Because I was under the impression that a road was not possible to go over that. Could somebody speak to that?
Maybe I'll ask Mr. Lunison to come forward for a moment. Or Mr. DeLuvic, do you want to address that first?
Yeah, through the chair, with respect to a pedestrian access versus a road, you're considerably more expensive to construct something like that. I do know that would fall to the developer for the development if council would choose to go that way, but then the city has to maintain that in the future and replace that structure in the future. So, the question is, do you really need that from a transportation network perspective? It's never been contemplated. If it was, we would have included, possibly in DCs, but I'm speculating here. But there is a significant cost to construct a roadway, make sure it's flood-proof. Whereas with the pedestrian access, you may allow it to be flooded for 1 day or 2 days out of the year or longer, because of the impact is not as significant if you had a roadway that was flooded out. So those are the type of things that we would have to deal with, and we definitely have to deal with the Conservation Authority on something like that. So I see a significant expense in constructing a roadway across that drain.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Next item.
Moving on to item 9.2, which is a report of the Social Services Committee, and there are 2 items listed for consideration. Item 9.2.1, that the report titled Achieving Equality by Name list as a Built for Zero Canada participating community be received for information. And item 9.2.2, that Stratford City Council endorse the occupancy plan for 230 Britannia Street, Stratford.
Moved by Councillor Henderson and second by Councillor Burbach. Discussion? Not all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Moving on to item 10, notice of intent, there was none scheduled. So moving on to item 11, reading of the bylaws. There are 6 bylaws listed on the agenda, along with the 2 bylaws listed on the agenda for consideration as follows. Item 11.1 is an adoption of official plan amendment number 29. Item 11.2 is an amendment to the zoning bylaw for zone change application Z05-19 for Part Lot 5, Concession 2. Item 11.3 is an amendment to the zoning bylaw for zone change application Z10-19 for 3194 Vivian Line 37. Item 11.4 is the 2020 BIA tax levy bylaw. Item 11.5 is to award the tender for the 2020 pruning, removal, and disposal of designated trees and stumps. Item 11.6 is to accept the proposal for preparation of a community safety and well-being plan. Turning to your addenda, item 11.8 is to authorize the entering into and execution of a cost apportionment termination agreement with respect to the Perth District Health Unit Shared Services. And item 11.9 is to authorize the entering into and execution of a revised cost apportionment agreement with respect to the provision of public health programs and services. These bylaws could be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present. And through your worship, I will note item 11.1 and 11.2 do relate to a declared pecuniary interest from the beginning of the meeting.
So we are going to take those separately, and I'll take a motion to take the balance of them collectively upon unanimous approval. Councillor Burback and Councillor Bunting. All those in favor? And that's carried. So we'll go to first and second reading. Moved by Councillor Beattie and Councillor Henderson. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And third and final reading is Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor. I will turn over the reading of the bylaws for 11.1 and 2 to Councillor or Deputy Mayor Ritzman.
So a motion to for first and second reading of 11.1. Moved by Councillor Beattie, second by Councillor Henderson. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And third and final for 11.1. Moved by Councillor Vasilakos, second by Councillor Ingram. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Moving on to 11.2, first and second reading. Moved by Councillor Bunting, second by Councillor Clifford. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And third and final for 11.2, moved by Councillor Gaffney, second by Councillor Henderson. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 12, consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items to be considered by council?
Councillor Vasilakos.
There's a CA 2020-17, the Deep Geologic Repository that Sarnia is out looking for support for. I don't know how many councillors have been following this story, but the idea of actually storing nuclear waste that close to some of the largest freshwater in the world is problematic. And I'm not exactly sure that that's actually the best place for it. And if Sarnia is looking for support, I wouldn't mind actually this council supporting their position on that.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Ritzma. Discussion. Councillor Clifford.
I followed it, but it would be helpful if we had a report on this, to say I'm in favor of it or against it without some, I've heard from our councillor, but I followed it somewhat, and I don't have enough. So if it can be referred back to staff.
You're making a referral?
I would like to make a referral motion.
For infrastructure, transportation, public safety?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Seconder for that? Councillor Gaffney, just no discussion on a referral, so all in favor. Opposed, if any? And that carries. Any other consent agenda items? Councillor Gaffney?
Item 2020-020. This work is going to be coordinated with the construction of the TP Tom Patterson Theatre, that it's not stepping over each other's toes.
The work along the river?
Yeah.
It started today. It'll be done within 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything further? New business? Motion to adjourn, and we'll convene immediately in committee. Councillor Burback and Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? And that's carried. And our first committee is Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety.
I don't know where that's at, because that was 2 or 3 years ago. Here it is.
Okay, I'll call the Infrastructure, Transportation, and Safety Committee to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? And seeing none, subcommittee minutes are there for background for the discussion. Item 4 is delegations. There aren't any scheduled. Moving on to report of the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services, and 5.1 is amending the snow and ice removal bylaw. There is a subcommittee recommendation there, but Mr. Delovic, did you want to speak to that briefly?
Yes, through the chair. This is, as noted in the report, as a result of request to look at what's happening in the downtown core with respect to snow removal. As noted, it's a bylaw that's, from what we can determine, has been placed since at least the 1950s. As a result of the discussion that took place, council would like us to revisit the map that we have for the downtown core. There seems to be some, it's evolved over time, but we would look at what streets are required by the businesses downtown to keep clear on what the city does. So as we've noted, really it's staff's recommendation that we maintain the existing bylaw as is, and a lot of it has to do with the potential for liability. Although we do require the businesses to clear the sidewalks, at the end of the day, the liability still stays with the city. And so this has been a long-standing practice, and it's staff's recommendation that we maintain this practice.
So there's a subcommittee recommendation to receive the report, moved by Councillor Burbach, seconded by Councillor Ingram. Are there any questions on that one? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. And then there's a second subcommittee recommendation that the core area site clearing map be referred to staff for review. Moved by Councillor Ritzma, seconded by Councillor Henderson. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Then moving on to item number 6.1, which is the fluoride action plan update from the City of Stratford. Mr. Zlovic, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? The report's fairly straightforward, but...
Yeah, through the chair, I think it just outlines what we're doing to, what's being done to notify the public with respect to the higher fluoride levels that occur naturally within the water in Stratford. And that, we'll do some more awareness when we report back to council with respect to fluoride levels.
Okay. So there is a subcommittee recommendation there. Moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Subban. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And move on to item 7, and the first piece is 7.1, which is the Glendon Road All-Way Stop and Pedestrian Safety Review. Again, Mr. Tolovic, did you have anything you wanted to add to the report?
Through the chair, no, just as noted that it didn't meet the warrants for including all-way stops.
Okay, so there is a subcommittee recommendation moved by Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Bunting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And item 7.2 is signage at intersections with one-way streets. We had quite a discussion at committee. There is a subcommittee recommendation there. Moved by Councillor Subban, seconded by Councillor Burbach. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And then item number 7.3 is 40-kilometer speed limits on local residential roads, and we do have a subcommittee recommendation that is there. Moved by Councillor Burbach, seconded by Councillor Bunting.
Which one are we doing?
The subcommittee recommendation. Did you see there? Moved by Councillor Subban. Any discussion? Councillor Burbach?
Yeah, I would like to speak to this motion. Just to give a little background about it, the proposal follows a Vision Zero approach to road safety. So I just wanted to give other members of council some information about Vision Zero. Vision Zero Canada recognizes that deaths and injuries are predictable and preventable, and that campaigns for the elimination of harm to any road users, including drivers, passengers, pedestrians, and cyclists. Vision Zero is a safe systems approach. So safe system thinking is about creating a system that works automatically by design to make road user deaths and serious injuries nearly impossible outcomes. So this approach represents the leading thinking in the world in road safety. What this data supports then is the lowering of speeds from 50 to 40 kilometers per hour on our local residential streets. The Vision Zero statistics tell us that a car traveling at 50 kilometers an hour will require approximately 63 meters to stop. That's 206 feet for people in the old system. And a pedestrian has a 1.5 out of 10 chance of surviving a collision with a vehicle going 50. A car traveling at 40 kilometers per hour will stop in approximately 45 meters, which is 147 feet. And a pedestrian will have a 7 in 10 chance to survive a collision at 40. The benefits aren't only to pedestrians, though. Collisions in general also decrease when speeds decrease because drivers have more time to avoid them. So not only is this beneficial to pedestrians, but drivers as well. So we should also note that the proposed reduction in the speed limit would be on local roads only, and that means residential roads, not arterial or collector roads such as Huron or John Street. Hopefully, this also will encourage drivers to use main roads instead of taking shortcuts through residential neighborhoods. Vision Zero is also built on 3 pillars: engineering, education, and enforcement. So this subcommittee recommendation includes all 3 of these things. So the engineer component includes reducing the speed limit and adding traffic calming measures. So the education component is also mentioned in the recommendation, and I would hope that the public consultation would include some background information for the pilot area, and also that would be considered educational. Enforcement is also important, and according to this management report, the Stratford Police support the idea of a pilot study prior to citywide implementation, and will continue to police actively in the area. So then they will provide feedback on compliance with the new speed limit. Interestingly, an article from today's Globe and Mail reports on a study done on a similar pilot project where speed limits were reduced to 30 kilometers per hour in a couple of Toronto neighborhoods in 2015. So they have the study results back, and I just want to read an excerpt from there. It got a lot safer to walk after speed limits were dropped on local roads throughout central Toronto, a new study found. The results, which were published Sunday in the journal BMC Public Health, run counter to a common narrative at Toronto City Hall that lowering the speed limit will not on its own save lives. Researchers combed police reports and found that 28% fewer pedestrians were hit by motorists on those roads after the speed limit was reduced. The number of people on foot killed or seriously injured on those roads plunged by 67%. These drops coincided with a sharp reduction in motorist ticketing by police, who cut their dedicated traffic unit in 2013. So that I feel that law enforcement will definitely enhance the success of this pilot study. Providing education and just raising awareness around the fact that speeding increases the odds of collisions, injuries, and deaths will also make a difference. After the initial introduction, enforcement concentrated on streets of concern on a complaint basis would certainly make the program more effective, but hopefully not be overwhelming to the police. In the past year, there have been several local streets where residents have asked me in particular about speed reduction, including Caledonia, Glendon, Foreman, Church, and Duro. Several of these streets are included in this pilot area. I think the selection of this area for pilot study is very good because it includes 2 elementary schools, 2 high schools, a nursery school, and 3 seniors' homes. There were also 2 tragic fatalities in this area in the past 2.5 years. Lorraine Ridgen and Magic Ron were both killed in this area. The goal is to eliminate these senseless deaths by better protecting all road users. For these reasons and many more, I support the recommendation to go ahead with the pilot study and the accompanying education and traffic calming measures.
Any other comments? Councillor Gaffney.
Just for clarification, this does not include collector or arterial roads. This is just the local roads. And I ask because I've been asked.
Mr. Dlovic?
To the chair, it's our understanding from the direction that it's meant for local roads and not our collector and arterial roads.
And that's what I will tell the person that was asking. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson?
Just a clarification, though, Mornington's already 40, so it would stay at 40, right?
Through the chair, yes. I mean, we already have some collector roads that have already been made 40, so they would stay 40. The idea is, things like Huron, Erie, Ontario, and some of our other collector roads wouldn't change.
So I needed a clarification on this 40-kilometer part. So when you're coming south from Huron Street on Olone, before the train tracks, there'll be an amber light and a 40-kilometer mileage to Brown Street? Is that what it's going to be?
Oh, that's a different item. That's the item about Olone and Brown Street. That's coming up. That's coming up in the agenda. That's a different item.
Oh, I went down too far, sorry.
Any other comments on this one, Councillor Sutherland? And then Councillor Kilburn.
All right.
I just wanted to comment that as part of the climate declaration, it was noted in there to encourage active transportation, and I think this would do just that. So I support the motion.
You're not getting my truck.
Councillor Clifford.
We already have a street, Kevin Street, that I go down if I'm at work. I go down every day, and on Sunday I went down there, and it's from Romeo to C.H. Meyer, it's 40, and then when you get into the subdivision, it goes up to 50 kilometers an hour, which is mind-boggling. But I tried to drive it at 40 kilometers, and you back up traffic if you do that. So I really don't think we have a problem, a speed problem. I think if there's a problem, it's an enforcement problem. So you can put it down to 40 or down to 30. All you will accomplish is having flag breakers, because people are not going to drive 40 kilometers an hour. They haven't on Devon Street. As long as I've been on council, it's come up a few times, and I just think in school zones and seniors buildings, it's important to have it slowed down. But I think if we're going to do it to start with, I think we should have public. I think we should have public input, even on a trial basis. So I don't support the motion on the floor. I don't think it's going to slow people down. And it's true in Toronto, they do have a problem, and big cities, but I really don't think in Stratford we do have a pedestrian. I know we have a few people have got killed, but I think I don't think we have a problem, and I don't think it's going to help anything other than cause people to be speeders, and that's it.
Councillor Ritzman?
Yeah, just to echo a couple comments. First of all, from Councillor Clifford, and I don't think I'm speaking against the motion, but certainly challenged with the fact of trying to drive the speed limit in the city of Stratford. If you drive the speed limit, you have somebody really, really following you close. So the enforcement piece, to come over to Councillor Burbach's comments, certainly enforcing current speed limits, I think, would go a long way. But certainly I had written down, as once again Councillor Burbach discussed, the ideas around education and awareness are not second to the reduction of speed at all. It has to go hand in hand.
Councillor Bunting?
Yes, I can see both sides of this particular picture, but I also see Councillor Clifford's point. I know there are a couple of citizens that were killed in a motor vehicle collision. I do believe that none of those were attributed to speeding. I think they were turning movements as opposed to speeding. As far as enforcement goes, I know that the Stratford Police on occasions may have some spare time, but it'll be very limited. I know that the province has come in with municipalities having their own standalone ticket machines, or machines that will photo radar, and the owner of the vehicle will be punished. I think we need some of those. I'm not sure what shape or size or cost they are, but at the same time, I think it's a prudent thing to be looking at those as well.
That item has been referred already to staff for report back, right? So we already have that coming back. Yeah, okay. Councillor Henderson?
Yes, I had one. Now, when you had, and I can't remember if it's in the report or not, but we had that speed thing up on Olone going north, and now it's on going south, right? Did you, when you got the readings off there, do you know offhand, anytime I went along there, every single one of us were hitting the brakes as soon as we saw it, because we were all over the 60, right? And coming back the same way, that one caught me the other night. It was on the other side there. I'm just wondering, what was the percentage of people that were over the 60? Do you have those figures? Or you can get them back to us, but.
Through the chair. Yeah, we can get it. It's very easy to get, and I know that Councillor Ingram asked for them. And there's people speeding on Olone. Not everyone is paying attention to the sign. There is a speeding problem there, and I think it speaks to some, the report. It's the nature of the road that's in that area, visually, the people see that you've got a road with not a lot of, intersections and things like that, so they tend to go fast. And that's always the challenge. And I think, we talked about, from a staff perspective, it's not simply putting up signs, it's that driver education. And you're trying to modify people's behavior and trying to get them to slow down. I know people will say that, they're speeding in my neighborhood, but what are you doing in someone else's neighborhood? You may be speeding there. So I think it's raising that awareness. So I think that's why we tried to do an area so that we can concentrate our public education program and our awareness program in those neighborhoods to get people to accustomed to, hey, check what you're doing. You may not realize how fast you're going in your neighborhoods.
So I know there's a couple people, but I had a couple comments in that this is the way. If you look at the number of municipalities that have either decided to go to 40 on local roads, meaning residential roads, or the number of communities that are piloting and rolling out, for example, the City of Ottawa has had all new subdivisions, their local roads are automatically 40, and now they're converting their old neighborhoods from 50 to 40 on a rolling basis, and they're rolling it out, and they're doing the same thing. They're changing a neighborhood, they're educating, then they're moving on and changing it. Hamilton, London, Toronto, Ottawa, smaller communities are doing pilot areas to try to do this. It is the way that, people who come from other places will very soon be used to driving 40 in residential neighborhoods. It's going to become the new standard, especially as communities start to talk about Vision Zero. As we talk about, and I always talk, it's great to have school zones that are 40, but we're trying to encourage students to walk to school, and those school zones are, I think, 100 meters on either side of the front of the school, right? But what happens on the half a kilometer radius around the school where we want children to walk? And what we need to do is change the perception in how, and it's true that 40 kilometers appears safer to pedestrians, which means pedestrians will then start to use the sidewalks and the roads again more often. It also creates better crossing distances for elderly and small children who need to cross a road. And if the traffic is driving 40, and it's the education piece, and it's starting to build that awareness that 40 is a safer speed in a local neighborhood road than 50. Anyways, I did have Councillor Bunting and Councillor Gaffney, and I believe Councillor Bunting. Just Bunting? Okay.
Yes, I would like to see less accidents, but I'm not convinced that there's that many accidents in those zones per se. I don't know if there are any statistics to say how many accidents there are, how many personal injury accidents there were in those particular zones. I'm not totally convinced that 40 kilometers per hour speed limit signs is really going to have an overall effect. I may be wrong, but I can say that speed bumps, calming certainly does have an effect. Burlington, the only place I go to in Ontario other than Stratford, is full of speed bumps, and they are on all sorts of similar subdivisions, and they are quite effective. If you just have a look at they've got even the ones that go right across the road, or the ones that are just on one side, which causes the car to do that. And they're very effective. Now, those would have an effect on the speed of vehicles, the ones that are designed there. So they may be worth looking at.
And just for clarity, the subcommittee recommendation does set aside some money for traffic calming measures as needed. So this would include incorporating some traffic calming measures of whatever kind.
I think they'll be more effective than putting a sign up. And I'm not disputing that the sign, it's a good thing, but at the same time, I'm not so sure that the sign alone will work.
Councillor Burbach, and then Councillor Ritzman.
Just a couple of things. I'm thinking about speed bumps, and if we put a speed bump on a road that's 50, I think people are going to be pretty surprised when they hit the speed bump at 50. It's going to do some interesting things to their car. There are other traffic calming measures that I think combining them with a speed limit reduction would be really effective. Also, to Councillor Clifford's point about public consultation. So in the motion, there is a public consultation recommended, and it says prior to implementation of the proposed pilot study in the Avon neighborhood, the public be consulted for input regarding the speed limit reduced. So it's part of the motion as well to take this out to the public and see what they think.
Councillor Ritzma, you had a comment?
So I was going to mention that, but I have a second piece. What are the measurables that we're going to use after the study to decide whether we're going to continue with the reduced speeds?
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, it'll combination with the police and what they're reporting. I mean, we have the equipment where we can monitor the speeds pre-consultation, post-consultation, so we can see what impacts have happened on. And so we'll go to the same streets. We'll measure, what are the speeds now, what are the speeds after the public consultation and the signs have been up, and then report back what has been the impact on it.
I would just like to add that, we've passed a trails, bike, and pedestrian master plan. We've talked about making active transportation part of our strategic initiatives, and this is a way to actually do it in a very cost-effective way through consultation and a trial period before we look at a rollout. And I just think it's an opportunity for us to try some of these things that we've talked about and passed motions on, but in a very controlled manner. So I'd like to support the motion.
Any other comments before I call the question? Or has it been moved and seconded? I've forgotten. We've been talking so long.
Through the chair, yes, it was moved by Councillor Burbach and seconded by Councillor Seven.
Perfect. So seeing no other comments, all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. So moving on to the visibility on Alone Avenue at Brown Street. And there is a report there and a subcommittee recommendation. Mr. Jalovic, did you have anything to add to the report?
Chair, I think as noted, there's some visibility issues at Brown at Alone. We've made a couple of recommendations. We actually did get an email forwarded to us from Councillor Ingram with respect to the existing signs, so we're reviewing that too. Residents suggested there's some issues with clarity on what the sign says, so we'll review that along with the recommendations that were made at subcommittee.
So are there any questions? Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, Councillor
I have the
Anderson?
question. So when you're coming south on Alone, the amber light's going to be on this side of the train tracks. You drive 40 until you get to Brown Street, and then it's 50 again?
Through the chair, yeah, that's the intent. And
okay.
By putting those tabs, it's really an advisory saying, and I think the wording may change to say hidden intersection ahead. And when you put in a yellow tab, it's just an advisory to drivers to say you should slow down. You'll see them on curves on road or exit ramps off highway. That's not the legal speed limit, but it's just an advisory to the drivers to say, we think you should slow down here because of visibility issues as you get over the tracks. There could be something coming out of that intersection there. So it gives you, by slowing down, it gives you more time to react to those vehicles making those turns.
You mean those ones when you come off the 401 and all those, would that say you should just be going 40 or 50? They're not legal, they're just advisory?
Yes, through the chair. They're not like a speed limit sign, they're really an advisory sign.
I didn't know
and we
that.
have those in the city at some curves where it says 30 kilometers an hour. It's just saying that's how you should take that corner, because if you take it faster, you could have some challenges, but it's still, say, a 50 kilometer per hour road. So that's the intent with those yellow tabs.
Any other questions or a mover for the Councillor Burbach? Move the subcommittee recommendation. Yes. Councillor Ingram seconded. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And then moving on, we have reported the Accessibility Advisory Committee and its access aisle no parking signs, and there is a subcommittee recommendation to refer it back to development staff to review on how they could actually accomplish what they're hoping for. Councillor Henderson, move.
Well, I'm just having an issue about what would be the issue about putting up a sign where the barrier section is? Like, I've seen that happen at a lot of places now because people park in those aisles. So you go places and you'll see accessible sign, no parking, accessible sign, no parking. People pull in. Am I misunderstanding that?
Mr. Delovic?
Through the chair, we'll come back with a report, but what the issue is that's usually where we have our drop curb. So we would have to figure out how would we sign that area and not impact the depressed curb so people can get up with their wheelchairs. We're not going to put it right in the middle, then they can't get around with their
Right.
wheelchairs. So how do we accommodate that area? So we just have to look at how physically would we draw people's attention not to park in those areas.
Have it out the front, they can't get in for sure. No, that would be pretty good.
Any other comments or questions? Mover for the recommendation. Subcommittee moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Rinsma. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And then we have item number 9 was report of the acting clerk and a request to use the reserve towards purchase of bike corrals. And there is a report there on how this came about. Ms. Defoe, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Through the chair, no, the report is fairly straightforward and comprehensive, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Ritzma?
Yes, a question. So I know in Europe, this is what they do. In the Netherlands, they do this. Now, are there communities of similar size to ours that a corral has been used and is effective?
Through the chair, I am not as familiar with use in municipalities of similar size, but I do know the City of London has used them and some of the other larger municipalities. And I will refer back to the chair where the subcommittee or the advisory committee recommendation has come from.
And this goes back to the bike parking implementation plan that staff prepared about 3 years ago, and their suggestion was to include 2 of these corral-style parking downtown. So it did come from staff after a recommendation from the Active Transportation Advisory Committee, and there was some feedback that people see them in their travels in various sizes of cities, but it originated back with that that report the Community Services developed. Councillor Henderson?
Yeah, I just had one question. As it mentions the 2 bike corrals, how many bikes do they hold?
I don't have that answer right there. It can be like 5, 6, 7. It depends on which one they buy. And I know that staff were looking into, they had one sourced, but then they couldn't find it, so they have to resource. So it varies.
How do we know how much money it is then?
It says right there.
Oh, up to.
Yeah, it's as big as you need it to be, but usually the corral is the minimum size of a parking spot, but then you can actually, they're scalable. Councillor Gaffney?
I'll move the staff recommendation, Madam Chair.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Seven. Any other questions? Or Councillor Ingram?
Just to follow up on our discussion at the subcommittee, there will be a report coming back regarding locations of the permanent locations for the bike corrals?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Through the chair, yes, staff are actively working on that report and are hoping to bring it back soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Gaffney?
Just for clarity, through you, Madam Chair, the reserve fund, that's what? That's the Active Transportation Reserve Fund?
Through the chair, there is a reserve for all council subcommittees, so that all subcommittee funds have been put into this particular reserve.
All the letters and zeros here really doesn't explain that. But thank you.
So if there aren't any questions, any other questions, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried, and it will come back for reconsideration tonight. Item number 10.1 is request for exemption from the noise control bylaw for the 2020 Movies Under the Stars event at the Bruce Hotel.
So moved.
Moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Henderson. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And all of the other items are for the information of the committee. No, item 11 is for the information of the committee. 11.2 is also, it's a capital project update. So now just motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Clifford, seconded by Councillor Burback. All in favor? And opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you.
You know, I looked up 9-3. It's in 3rd Street South. And it wasn't the same as the picture. Weird. This still does it.
Okay, and I'll call the Planning and Heritage Committee meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 3 is subcommittee minutes there for your reading pleasure. There are no delegations scheduled. Item 5.1 is the proposed exemption to sign bylaw 159-2004, and it is for an address fascia sign. Moved by Councillor Clifford, seconded by Councillor Ritzma. Any questions or comments? Councillor Henderson.
It says in the report that it's south, but is it not north? Because when you look up south, that's by Center Street. So it's actually north, because that's where because it becomes north once you cross Huron, and it's right on the corner of Huron and St. Vincent, right? Yeah, so it actually should be changed to north. If you Google 93 St. Vincent Street South, it takes you to just by Center Street.
The river is the divider. So your amendment is noted. Will the mover and seconder agree to it?
Thank you.
Was that a yes from the mover and seconder? Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks. And a motion for adjournment? Moved by Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Beatty. All in favor?
Thank you.
See, it's that building you want, and that's north.
You're correct.
I looked it up, and I thought, oh, buildings, and I drove down, I couldn't find it. And then I saw the picture somewhere, and I thought, at least your meeting for sure. One more to go.
Call to order the Finance and Labor Relation Committee. Are there any disclosure, pecuniary interest, and general nature thereof?
Yeah, item 5.1, there's several businesses that I'm involved with that I'm going to declare on.
You had the same.
Yeah, 5.1, two of the organizations, Cycle Stratford and the Community Foundation, I involved with as a private citizen.
It's noted.
An email.
Item 4.1, Perth County information, network purchase of delivery van. Do you want to come up and just explain what's happening here or anything? You spent all this time, we might as well hear from you too.
So the PCIN van, this is part of the solution that was devised by the PCIN board, that is library board member representatives from Stratford, St. Mary's, West Perth, North Perth, and Perth East, who are responsible for maintaining the consortium, which shares all the library materials and purchases the joint software and participates in joint projects together. So this van is part of the solution to the province's budget cut to the agency that was delivering roughly 80,000 items to and from Perth County, within Perth County and among the rest of the province, or within the rest of the province. So the PCIN board proposes that in order to maintain this core service, that it will purchase from the reserve funds that each library has been collecting for nearly the last decade, that it will purchase a van to continue the service. The operational costs for the van and the staffing to do do has already been included in the 2020 budget and approved. So the van would be purchased from existing reserve funds and has gone forward with the quote process.
Okay, Councillor Ritzma.
So is this van similar to the existing plow van?
Correct. It's a tall roof.
Councillor Gaffney, a question.
I think $80,000 is a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a van. To spend on a Mercedes van, we cannot find something a little more pragmatic from the dozen or so car dealerships in Stratford. Like, it just seems like an excessive amount of money for what is essentially a courier service. So if it gets moved, I'm not going to support it. And I know Stratford share is only $28,000, but I'm surprised the other councils. And when you say it comes from the Library Reserve Fund, the Library Reserve Fund is populated by taxpayers' dollars. Am I correct in that, Mr. Director?
Through the chair, yes. It's from our funding commitment to the Stratford Public Library, and as part of their budget process, they have allocated funds for particular purposes into reserve funds.
Thank you.
Councillor Ingram.
Julia, if I'm not mistaken, we put out an RFP asking for people to provide us with information on their available van units and the cost, and none of the Stratford car dealerships bid on that?
That is correct. I personally contacted the local dealerships who would be able to supply a tall van with the specifications needed for the delivery service. We do need a tall roof because in previous iterations we have had irregular cargo roof size and encountered repetitive strain injuries due to the bending, twisting, and lifting required for 50-pound bins full of library materials. So I did personally contact the local and regional dealerships within Perth County that would be able to supply such a van, and received only the one response.
Councillor Gaffney.
Well, I'm going to offer that we have a fleet manager who should be the one out ordering vehicles. We shouldn't be asking our directors and supervisory staff to go out and order these things, because that's what we pay our fleet manager to do. And he would approach the local dealerships quite possibly differently. So I just offer that as an observation.
Councillor Pascal, then Councillor Ingram.
I was just going to say, given the specifications needed for the van, I just want to point out that just because it's a Mercedes doesn't make it an electric vehicle. Mercedes makes standard medium duty like vans and delivery vehicles for North America and Europe. Like it is a van, and given the specifications, the price is probably what it's going to be. So, and I just want to say that for Stratford, it's a very important service. But for our neighboring communities that have very small libraries and rely on the ability to share resources, it can be a lifeline for rural communities. I know our job isn't necessarily to always, we're thinking about, Stratford's collection, but it offers access to library materials to our neighboring communities that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. And the fact that they're willing to cost share this vehicle and the operating costs, I'm going to support it.
Councillor Ingram, then Mayor. Go ahead.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Okay. And second by Councillor Burbach. Or Matheson going to speak to the
Just
motion.
if I could ask Mr. Humble, the control of the reserve, is at the discretion of the city?
Yeah, that's a very good question. My answer would be yes. It is a city reserve, but money has been directed back into this reserve from the Stratford Public Library.
And I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is under the Public Libraries Act, the board has the right to reserve funds, and they have reserved funds for this purchase, and they are an autonomous group under the Ontario legislation. And while we might not like the expense, if the board has approved it, it's really just asking us to write a check. So I would remind all of us, some of us, that we have a legislative obligation.
Councillor Gaffney.
Well, then let me ask through you, Mr. Chair, for the sake of education, why is the question before us tonight?
Because we've been the check writer for years, but in actual fact, it's only because we're the bookkeeper. The library requisitions money from us every year for library services. We approve it in the budget. They're allowed to set the reserves and such. And once we do that, where they spend their money is what is up to the board, really.
Councillor Gaffney.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor, but that doesn't, I don't think that quite answers my question, and I don't mean any disrespect.
Why is it here?
I mean no disrespect at all. Like, if that, like, I agree, we approved the budget, which probably included this. So I'm just confused on why it's coming back to us for us to basically approve.
Because it's been something we've done this way for many years. Doesn't mean it's right. It just means that that's what they do. As an example, the police department used to go out and buy 2 police cars every year, and for some reason it came over here to City Hall up until about 7 or 8 years ago and asked us to approve for them to buy police cars. It's not in our purview. It was the discretion of the Stratford Police Service Board. They requisitioned money in their budget. They had the reserve funds. They're allowed to purchase their vehicles. The library is no different. They're under a separate piece of legislation. And whether we've done it for years or not, it's probably not appropriate, and we can sort it out, but I want us to be careful we're not contravening the Public Libraries Act.
Yep. Thank you.
We have a staff recommendation. Any other questions or comments on, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's passed. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming up. Item 5.1, report of the 2020 Community Grants Evaluation. Pity the one-time and multi-year funding. And we have, I'm not going to read it, but it's in front of you. Ocean Quest, Councillor Gaffney.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
And seconded by Councillor Ingram. Questions, comments? Councillor Seven first.
Sorry, is this for both of the recommendations for the single and multi-year all at once, or are we doing them separately?
It says one-time and multi-year funding. Let's see if I really need it. I think it's both, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Then if I could comment, I just wanted to comment on item 5 on the multi-year request for Razmajaz.
Yes.
Last year, I was surprised that this particular item came under scrutiny more so than really any of the other ones. And so far as I can see, I would like to see this one approved, whether it's approved multi-year as they've requested or similar to the summer music approval, which is approved for 1 year but will be reconsidered even though it's multi-year next year. I think given the other approvals that we were providing and the service they provide in return for the amount that they're requesting, I just think I'm not sure why this one was sort of centered out and denied when comparable to other similar type requests. And I'm not sure if I would have to make a separate motion to approve that or how that would work.
I will try to answer your question. Kathy was on that committee, I believe.
Yeah, I can answer. I just want to say that in years past, if somebody had declared on different, we just pulled them out. Are we pulling them out, the ones that we've declared on?
Yes.
Okay. For the Razmajaz, the reason it came back this way is because it's a city-owned piece of equipment. It's basically we own it, but part of the difficulty is that all of the other organizations that ask for funding, they're just asking for partial funding. They're not asking for their entire budget. The reality is that Razmajaz, they're using city-owned equipment, and we're paying them to run it, and they're not doing any fundraising. It's not part of their budget to do anything else like all of these other organizations. And so we did tell them last year that it would be the last year of funding, and then if an organization wanted to take it over, they could, but there didn't seem to be any sort of movement towards either fundraising or getting funds from anything like that. It's just one of those odd things that if the city's going to pay for the whole amount of running this, plus house it, plus repair it, plus own the thing, then that's either something to bring in-house and run through one of our departments, at which case everyone is inundated with work. or we let it go and find a community group that actually wants to run it. If they then want to come back for partial funding, like all these other organizations do, that's a separate item. But that's where the genesis of this came from. Because it used to be the city would store it and do the repairs on it, but somebody else would run it completely and maybe ask us for a little bit of money to help out. So that's the genesis of it.
Councillor Ritzma.
I'm certainly going to speak in favor of the motion, but equally important, I want to thank the Community Grants Evaluation Committee. That is a lot of work and a lot of time spent, so thank you very much on behalf of the rest of council. Great job.
Well, on the Razzmatazz, it used to be funded through the tourism budget, and they cut the program loose, which was taxpayer-funded dollars going to them and being allocated. You have a group of volunteers who, regardless of what the honorarium is, doesn't significantly cover the amount of time the musicians or the boat operators put in. And I think it's a pretty reasonable piece of entertainment for 49 shows a year that you don't have to be a tourist to appreciate it as much as a resident. And there's other groups on here that charge people to go to their events. They're getting significantly more. If we wanted to give them some portion and challenge them to go fundraise the difference, I think that'd be great. But some recognition for the volunteer hours and their 30 years that are coming up this year, I think would be valid.
Councillor Bunting and then Henderson.
I may have imagined this, but I thought we got an email or something from the gentleman just like, was it yesterday or even today? And it said that something along the lines that the mayor has just mentioned. They'll come up with some cash and we'll get some sponsors and so on and so forth. So and they can also appeal their denial and bring it further. So if my attitude would be is if they can come to us with a number of sponsors who are going to contribute X amount of dollars, then we'll have a good look at it. That would be my answer.
I was going to ask the clerk, because we have pecuniary interest, and I don't have track of all the pecuniary interest ones. I do have track of all the ones that Councillor Burbach and Councillor Maslasco.
Through the chair, I would actually ask for clarification on all of the numbers specific to the two councillors who declared.
I think that would help if we...
I have the numbers here for mine, 9, 11, 13, and 21.
Okay. And Kathy, what ones do you have?
I have to find the numbers. I know that Cycle Stratford is number 21.
21?
And Community Foundation, I just have to find that one. There it is, 29.
Okay, so Councillor Burbach has number 9, 11, 13, and 21, and Maslasco has 21 and 29. Is that correct? So all the other ones, other than those ones, we'll talk about, and then we'll go back to those from there.
Sure. I know the thought Councillor Bunting expressed on the Razzmatazz. I think the challenge is when you go out to ask for funding from people, they say, well, where's the city sit on this? If you'd want to make it a target, you could give them an amount subject to being matched dollar for dollar from another source, and then they have a target to go work towards. And I think that might be easier for them than have people say, well, if you get some money from the city, come back and see us, because I think they're at a catch-22.
Well, I would accept a motion if you want to put one on the floor, Mayor, and then we can discuss that by itself.
I would put that we match them dollar for dollar up to, I think their total budget for the year was $8,600. So I would say dollar for dollar up to $4,000.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and that's seconded by Councillor Tebben on item 5 on the multi-year grants. So, go ahead.
Through the chair, there is currently a motion on the floor, so this would be
an amendment.
A motion to amend.
A motion to amend. Thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Henderson.
So number 31, dealing with the Feline Friends Network.
Well,
why don't we finish?
What?
You want to finish the amendment probably first, Councillor Henderson?
Item 5, we have that on the floor right now. You want to speak to that?
He has an amendment on the floor.
On item 5.
So we're voting before we finish the discussion?
No, on the amendment.
On the amendment.
Okay.
Because it only deals with item 5.
Okay.
So we have this on the floor. Anyone else would like to speak to the amendment?
Number 5, that's the Kiwanis rental reduction?
It's the grant request from the Stratford Power
Down at the multi.
on the Rasmus Jazz. It's on the 2020 multi-year grants.
Multi-year grant recommendation number 5.
It's on here. Oh, I'm down on the chart, that's why.
Okay?
Yep.
Harton, Gina.
No, I'm just ready to vote.
Okay, I'll call a question on the amendment on the floor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's passed. So we'll go back to everything else but 9, 11, 13, 21, and 29. Councillor.
So number 31, I'm on the charts. I don't know if it's the same number up above, but the Feline Friends Network, they asked for 10,000 last year and we gave them 2,500, and they asked for 10,000 again this year, and they spray neuter about 100 cats. Why are we not giving them anything? That's a great service for our city.
I think Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Bunting, and Councillor Gaffney will speak to it.
Because we discussed the fact that our local Humane Society already provides low-cost spade and neutering services. Like they have a program for people that can't afford the full thing. And the other thing is that they could not guarantee that the cats these people spayed and neutered were all within the city of Stratford.
Well, we know they aren't. They already told us that.
So we're not paying to spay the neuters for North Perth or Perth South.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
So, and we told them last year that there wasn't going to be any money for that program this year, but we'll wait for them to make the application.
Councillor Last.
And I think if I recall, some of the low-cost providers were like London, or they were other places where we have a service here that our Humane Society is trying to promote and trying to get people using and off the ground, and it's local. So we sort of, between not being able to guarantee that the people would be City of Stratford residents, and also the fact that the providers of the service could be outside of Stratford, we thought that we would try to promote the local option.
Councillor Seven.
I'm just going to comment on that item as well. I would like to, I'm just going to sort of, a motion that I would propose to amend 31 would be something along the lines of the same amount as last year, 2,500, but because I know there is some overlap in the spay and neuter program, but my understanding from Feline Friends is they do much more than that. They're actually on the ground. They support they supply traps. They provide support to actually catch and release the cats. I would also put, if the concern is about the city limits, we could have that money that we provide them only go toward cats they spay and neuter within the city and supplies for that, and anything else. They do have fundraising events that they could do to fundraise for the other expenses, but I just think that they're still doing, there is some overlap with the local Humane Society, but I think they are going above and beyond a different area. So I'd like to make a motion for an amendment to 31 to provide $2,500 funding for within the city boundaries for trap, neuter, and release program that they currently
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that for discussion, but I have a
Okay.
comment on that.
Sure, go ahead.
When they put their proposal in, I guess I don't know who's all on the funding committee, I can't remember.
If you
but
address me,
when
I'll
we
address
put
it
the, when they put their proposal in, did they break it down by how many they did last year and how many were in the city limits? Because maybe what we could look at is they get so much per cat that's in the city limits only.
Okay,
Sort of goes along with what you're saying, right?
I'll put it back to.
We've got our own local providers. Why would we pay to have
Because they do it a lot cheaper.
another group come in to offer low-cost
It needs juice.
programs?
That's it.
Can't hear you. If you could speak in the mic, it would help.
I apologize. We have local providers that are providing the same service that this group wants to provide. So why would the taxpayers of Stratford pay for somebody else to provide a program that they're already making a contribution towards? And there's providers out there, veterinarians and stuff, that are providing low-cost spay and neutering programs. I don't know what is so special about the Feline Friends that we can't accept that other groups provide the program to the citizens of Stratford.
I'm just speaking to the same thing. Their trap neuter return isn't done by any other organization. So it's a specific thing to deal with feral cats and neuter them, and they return them back to the street, so to speak. But they're cats on the street that can't reproduce. So it's a different program that's not provided by anyone else. So if out of the 3 programs, that one is unique to them.
Kathy, do you have your hand? I thought you had your hand up.
I was just going to say, I'm going to point out that there is a healthy contingency there of about $50,000, so that if an organization wants to come and provide us with any additional information or talk a little bit more about their program, maybe in the context of what else is happening, they are welcome to do so. And so there is always that opportunity for them to come bring more information.
Councillor Seven.
Just to comment on Councillor Gaffney's kind of points, and I don't know if they're formed as a question or not, but Feline Friends has been operating in Stratford for many years, and they also provide, as Councillor Burbach mentioned, a different service, but along with a no-cost service. So rather than a low-cost service for some people, they provide the trap neuter program for no cost, and so that is where it differs a little bit as well.
Councillor Gaffney.
Through you, Mr. Chair. They provide a no-cost, I don't believe they provide a no-cost program. It's costing somebody, and in the case is it's costing the citizens of Stratford. So there's no such thing as no cost. I'll dispel that rumor right this minute.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and Councillor Henderson wants to speak to.
I just want to speak quickly on it. I can't remember how many years ago it was they came in, they did a presentation here, and we endorsed what they were going to do for the city. And they have reduced the amount of cats that I didn't even know what a feline cat was before, but is it feline? Feral cat was before. I guess I still don't, but anyway, no, I do really. But they've reduced the amount a lot in our city, and they do a lot of work, and they fundraise. But as Councillor Vacalos has pointed out, I think it's important that they come and do a presentation to us and explain, because it's been quite a few years.
Okay. We have an amended motion on the floor that it's $2,500. I believe that was the motion, and I'll call the question. All in favor of the amended motion? Opposed, if any? That's defeated. Anything else other than 9, 11, 13, 21, and 29? Councillor Beatty.
So I'll make a motion to approve the items for which Councillor Vasilakos had current interest in, and then I'll make a
I believe we have a motion on the floor, so.
Do we?
Yeah, we do. And if it's all but those, who made the motion?
So through the chair, the motion was originally made by Councillor Gaffney and Ingram, so the next step would be to approve the motion as amended.
Okay.
Before we leave the feline piece, is it within our next step to reach out to them, or how do they know that we would appreciate them coming forward?
I'll put that back to staff. What happens?
Yes, we will communicate the outcome of the discussion today, and request that if they advise them that if they wish to submit an appeal, we'll give them the process to do so.
Thank you.
Councillor Seven.
So does this work, just for process here, could we take 31 separately? Is that how that would work here?
Well, it's. Pardon? Yeah, well,
I guess I'm requesting to, if that's possible. Thank you.
Okay. So we motion on the floor. Would you repeat that?
Yep, so through the chair, it would be the motion on the floor as amended, excluding item 31.
That's the question. I'll call that. All in favor?
What's item 31?
The feline.
That's feline friends.
We're taking 31 separate.
We're going to take that separately.
We just did.
Yeah.
But it's going to be completely separate from this.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion? That's unanimous. Mayor.
I'll move items 9, 11, 13, and 21.
Well, in 29.
And 29.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Richmond seconds it. Any other questions or comments on those 5? All in favor? That's unanimous. Councillor Seventh.
Oh, well, I was just going to vote, I was just going to oppose 31, but I'm sure somebody else will move 31 separately.
Well, it's up to you if you want to, is that correct?
No, Councillor Seven proposed an amendment which defeated, so you need an affirmative motion from someone willing to move 31.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. Councillor Ingram.
I'll move it.
You're a seconder. Councillor Gaffney seconds it. Okay. So is there, like, is it the 2,500 that you want to come back
So,
with us again, or?
Through the chair, the motion to amend this recommendation to allow for 2,500 was defeated. The motion on the floor is that a 2020 grant request of $10,000 from Feline Friends Network of Stratford for support of its trap, neuter, return / adoption program and low income program be denied, the one currently on the agenda.
And I'll point out that they do have the opportunity to come back and appeal that, and they can appeal for the full 10,000. So they can come back and ask for anything from 0 to 10.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you.
Opposed, if any.
Oh, sorry, opposed, if any. That's passed. Sorry about that, Bonnie. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Burbach, Councillor Vasco, all in favor. Thank
you. Council reconvene, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest made at standing committee and to be restated at the reconvene portion?
Councillor Vasilakos.
Yeah, item 5.1 from Finance and Labor Relations, Cycle Stratford and the Community Foundation.
Councillor Burbach.
Finance and Labor Relations Committee, 5.1, for businesses that I have a relationship with.
Moving on to item 15.2, committee reports. Item 15.2.1 is from the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee, and that's the request to use reserve towards purchase of bike rallies in 2020 be approved.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Burbach. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor. Opposed, if any, that's carried.
Item 15.2.2 is from the Finance and Labor Relations Committee with item 4.1, that the Perth County Information Network purchase of a delivery van be approved.
Councillor Clifford and Councillor Henderson.
With the change to north, right?
Yes.
St. Vincent Street North?
No. We're on the Public Library on Wheels.
Oh, you're still in the library? I thought you said point.
No problem.
3.
And you'll still second it, right?
Yep.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Item 15.2.3 is the Planning and Heritage Committee moved by Councillor Ingram and seconded by Councillor Burbach with the noted change, because that's how it was passed. Don't worry, we got you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, carried.
Through your worship, it's my understanding the final item is to adopt the confirmatory bylaw.
Councillor Seven and Councillor Vasilakos moving first and second reading. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Third and final is Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Bunting. All those in favor? That's carried. Adjourning this evening, Councillor Clifford and Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.
There's no balance to it, right? But I don't think you should equate people speaking in university to potentially curtailing funding, because that's a whole different thing about freedoms, right?
Well, you know what?
But taxpayers are paying that bill.
And is he getting paid for this gig?
I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Why else would he be doing it?
All I hope is, because, freedom of speech is one thing that I cherish, obviously, particularly being here, but
I would never know that.
It ain't easy. Just ask Don Cherry.
Yeah.
Freedom isn't free.
But I just hope nobody shows up. How about that? Okay, but I hope you guys show up. We're going to take a 2-minute break. We're coming right back, so please stay tuned. We'll see you then.
Come home to Hope Valley and see all the faces you love again.
Scandalous. There he is.
Here we all are.
When Calls the Heart Season 7 premieres February 23rd. And watch all your favorite heartwarming episodes of seasons 1 to 6 only on Super Channel On Demand.
We were born in Canada. We spoke English. On the streets, we weren't welcome. But on the field, we were the Asahi. Vancouver's champions. Everyone cheered for us. Our people had a voice. Then Canada declared war on Japan. They took us from our homes, called us enemies, forced us into camps. But we brought the game with us. Baseball helped get us through the internment.
The Vancouver Asahi were among the 22,000 Japanese Canadians interned during the Second World War. The team never played another game.
Hi, I'm Dave Carroll, host of Brant Life. Join me every Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. for a brand new show featuring you and your stories and the things you care about right here on Brant Life on Rogers TV.
Storm action on Rogers TV.